the fact. But any time that he's spotted, we've had issues. I think there's been some false reports about what he's been doing. We heard Blue's out and attacking. So, well, my dog, I'm looking at him right here. He hasn't been out all day. That's happened a few times. Again, I'm just going to tell you stuff, and it's hearsay, so I'm not really going to bring it up. But it's kind of created an ugly atmosphere in the neighborhood, and I just feel, like I said, I think it could have been handled a little differently before, and maybe we could have avoided all this a lot sooner.
Is Blue, you said that he's a rescue dog?
Yes, ma'am.
When did you adopt him?
2011?
It was February 2012.
February 2012. So.
And is this your first dog, or?
No, ma'am. No, we have another dog, and she's just large. She's easy, but he's hyper and he's big and scary. And he makes these noises that scare the heck out of people, and I get it. But, like I said, if I felt any danger towards the neighborhood as far as people or anything like that, he'd be gone. Like I said, I disabled kid at home too.
It sounds like this is not a bad resolution. It may calm people's fears, and it also allows them to stay at home, be with your family, and
Yeah, we're not unreasonable. We get it. So.
And a lot of people don't know, and they don't have dogs around, don't necessarily know how to
that
react,
too,
but
sure.
That's the dog owner's responsibility.
Is there anything further that you or your wife want to add to the record before I open it up to public comment? And I also want to make sure the board has asked any questions that they might have.
Mr. Condon, would you say Mr. Hitchcock and his family have been cooperative with you in terms of the restraints and
Yes.
requests? So they've been working with you
Yes,
to try to comply with what you feel is the proper?
absolutely.
That's good. Thank you.
And my biggest concern in reading through the file was that at one point, the dog hadn't gotten its rabies. I think that is critical to.
Yeah,
to make
and that's all
sure.
squared away. Like I said.
Monitor, but keep monitoring that.
Absolutely.
That's critical.
I travel 6 months a year, so it's just stuff I just.
Somebody's gotta do it.
Yeah, but we've got it now. It's all
Yeah.
labeled up on the calendar for us.
And there's just no
Yeah.
good side to that argument.
Absolutely.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Okay, well, I know that there are a number of people here to speak, so I want to make sure that anybody in the room that is here that would like to give, I need you to come to a microphone and state your name and address for the. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. You came in after we did the swearing in, so I need you to stand up and be sworn in. It's a really hard swearing in. Do you, first of all, do you swear that the testimony to be given in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Now, you'll give your name and address for the record.
Can I ask the chair, so if there's public comment, it's not testimony, is it?
I think for the purposes of the dog hearing, it is testimony. It's factual testimony.
Okay, so I think that's what we're asking them to speak to, not opinions
Oh.
or,
Very true.
right?
Yes,
So
this is-
let's
yeah.
make that very clear, that we're seeking factual
Facts.
information, not guessing or,
Yeah, this is not about
hearsay.
somebody else's understanding, this is about your own.
My name is Nancy Palmer. I live on Francis Street in Concord. And one of the police logs, that was me, that he read about Francis Street. I have a yellow lab. It's for their dog had been on my back steps before. And I looked out, that was sort of right when they probably got the dog, and I called the house, and one of the sons came over and got the dog, and that was fine. And then other times I would, I'd go out in Cousins Field, like early Saturday morning with my dog on a leash. There was something about the chemistry of their dog and my dog, something, I don't know what it was. It was like, rah, like when they'd see each other. So I didn't walk by their house. I didn't want to cause that. And our mailman at the time, Steve, he would say, don't go by the house. Don't want to go by the house, like with your dog. So I didn't. And so one morning early, I was out with the dog Saturday morning, and I look up and I could see the two dogs out. And I was like, oh, geez, it was like 6 a.m. or whatever. So I just grabbed my dog and we ran in the house.
You said the two dogs out?
There was two dogs
Okay,
out. They
okay.
have two dogs.
Yeah.
So we came in the house, and soon after, their dog was on my driveway barking through my window where my dog would sit. No, like viciously barking, right? I did call them. I left a message on their machine. They did not pick up. I said, your dog is here in my yard. And then I looked out, and there was a skunk in my yard, and now the two of them are in my yard. And I'm like, it's about ready to get sprayed by a skunk, which it didn't. The dog didn't even bother with the skunk. The dog went off, and the skunk went off. But I'm like, why am I worried about this? You know what I mean? Like I'm in the house. I mean, we're in my house. So then it was August 2015. My husband just took the dog for a little walk around the block before dinner, and he had him on a leash, and he walked by their house, and I was like, why, after the fact, I was like, why did you do that? You're not supposed to walk by, like with the dog. Their dog was in the house. I mean, it was summertime. The door was, you could see the dog, and the dog was like going crazy with my dog walking by the house. And my husband just kept walking. Well, it ran out the back door. The back door mustn't have been open. Ran outside, and then jumped the fence, and came, and attacked my dog. Now, Jim was home, so Jim came running out, picked up the dog, and that stopped it, so I did call the dog officer. I had called the dog officer I've called the police, I've called the dog officer. Like now it was like, then I'm hearing like, oh, that dog's always out, or, so then I now called the dog officer, and I've had long conversations with her. This was a few years ago. I don't have my dog anymore, so I'm not dealing with this, but and she was always like, oh, they're going to build a fence. They're going to be putting up a higher fence. That higher fence is still not there. I don't, that was 2.5 years ago. And that was 6 months before that. She had said they were going to do a fence. And she goes, oh, I feel sorry. They have an autistic child. The husband's away a lot. And I'm like, I understand. I totally get that. But we're not, then I don't see anything done, And she never did come over and talk about my dog. And she just says, go and get your dog checked. So I did because there was blood on my dog, but I couldn't see a wound per se. So by the time it was like a week later, I went to the vet. I called the vet today to get the exact date, and she said that when you had said you were there a week before the dog got bit, she didn't see any punctured wounds at all, and said, I don't think he broke the skin, but I don't know why there was blood. She says maybe a tooth or I don't know, whatever. So then they go make sure he's rabies shot. So I have called there, and I have left messages, and no one has answered me back or picked up the phone. So I went ahead and I called the town. I called, because I guess it's public knowledge, public record if your dog's been registered or rabies shots, and they had told me he wasn't. So then I called the dog officer. I said, the dog's not even registered. The dog hasn't had his rabies shot. Well, they told me call the vet. His vet. So I called the vet. They go to Concord Animal Hospital, I guess. I called the vet, and the vet said, no, they haven't been in a couple years, whatever, for shots, unless they've gone somewhere else. But the town had never had any record of it. So then I remember being really mad about it and really upset and afraid. Like, I could see if I walked by the house to be afraid, or nervous, but when he was coming into my own yard, or I was just out in the public fields, I couldn't even go there. I was always like, I told my kids, don't go by there, make sure the dog's on the leash, you know what I mean? Like, and I remember didn't think she was doing much either for me. She was sort of, I remember even saying, like, you're taking sides. I don't want to be taking sides. I'm just telling you facts, what's going on. So anyway, I did not get a notice about this meeting, but I had heard about it this weekend, and I said, I was affected by this. I'm going to come, and I'm going to say my spot.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to give a factual or
Well, I have never been, my name is Caroline McCloy. I live at 137 Central Street. And I used to walk my dogs by there, but it is way too scary. The dogs come up, they snarl, they bark, they climb on the fence, you're so afraid that they may be the nicest dogs in the world in the house, but outside they are terrifying to people to walk by. And so for basically the past 2 or 3 years, I don't even walk down that road. It's like, it's in my neighborhood, but it's off limits.
My name is Joanna Swain. I live at 239 Central Street. And the thing that I'd like to testify to you about is an incident that happened several years ago, probably 2013 or 2014. I was picking my daughter up from Thoreau Elementary School at the end of the day. The scene there was school buses, kids everywhere. I saw a friend of mine who was walking her small dog to pick up her daughter, who was in the same class as my daughter. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, comes this enormous dog. And I have had large dogs my whole life. I'm not afraid of large dogs. This dog was snarling and was being aggressive, was jumping up at her. She had her little dog in her arms. It was jumping and lurching at her. I was trying to grab the big dog, trying to get in between her and the big dog, and I could not. He was just too fast moving around. Ultimately, and this is the incident I think you were referring to that was never reported to the police, which I actually did call the police about. Ultimately, I suggested to her that she move on to the school bus, where there were already a half-full school bus of kids. She went on there with her small dog, and I blocked the door, and the dog was continuing to lurch to try to get onto the school bus, past me. And it was horrifying. Small kids, all around. And you can't say that nobody ever came to you, because when I found out it was your dog, I came to you that very afternoon. And it was not a pleasant.
How it happened.
It was not a pleasant exchange. I'll just say that.
Kind of warping the story slightly, actually.
Okay, let's,
So it just, one incident. This was several years ago. I did report it to the police. I had long conversations with the dog control officer about it. As soon as I spoke to her on the phone, she said, "Oh, I know." I said, "It's the dog." I didn't even know the family's last name. I said, "It's a dog on Chase Road," and she said, "I know exactly which dog that is." So, I mean, this was several years ago, and I think the issue is the dog keeps getting out and being free.
thank you. Was there somebody back there? Is there anybody else? So, Tanya, is this about the dog?
Yes, and it is a question, of course, and it's a question that's relevant.
Okay, so this is factual and it's about the dog.
It's about the dog and it's a question. I don't know the dog. I was just wondering simply if you might, if anyone has considered about training options and about what the family
Okay, Tanya,
circumstances.
that's not for this hearing. But thank you.
Okay.
Is there any more, please come up. Yeah.
Hi,
Please state your name and.
Maureen Giza, 245 Central Street. When I first moved back into the neighborhood, it was probably spring of 2013 that I saw Blue wandering the neighborhood, and there was 2 incidences that I saw him, and I walked him home and knocked on the door and said, I saw your dog out, and he went in and immediately jumped right back out, and they weren't sure how the dog got out, and one of the children came out and said the back door was left open. And so both times that I tried to help bring the dog home, because I was also a dog owner, the dog was able to get out. Since then, when I started hearing incidences with neighbors, I thought, I'm not gonna do that again. But both times I tried, it immediately got right back out.
Thank you. Please come up to the
I actually just
microphone.
have a question for Lieutenant Morahan.
But if you need to
I just have it's just a question of what was submitted.
The audience is watching either on at home or online, can't hear you.
Sorry.
I know, it's really tight squeeze tonight.
Hi. Thayer Swartwood, Prairie Street. I just had a question for Lieutenant Moorhan. Lieutenant Moorhan, as you know, I submitted a letter. I was just wondering if that letter was included in the documentation that was shared with the select committee.
I don't know if the police report came up to the town manager or not, but.
What, the letter, what date was it?
The name of the email, was it?
It was a letter I sent on January 5th of 2018 via email to Lieutenant Moorhan.
So, I don't know that we have that.
I think there was
Would you
a
like to
synopsis
summarize
of
that?
it. I think they summarized it in the report.
Oh, that's fine.
Police report.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You want to
You wanna summarize it for me?
I could read it.
Okay.
Lieutenant Moran, I understand from our neighbor Pete Bush that you are investigating recent issues with Blue, a dog owned by the Hitchcock family on Chase Road, and that you are gathering additional feedback from neighbors. We have lived on the corner of Prairie and Chase since June 2006 and have had a number of run-ins over time with Blue. We've reported the more serious incidents directly to your department or the animal control officer. Most recently, on October 22nd, 2017, our chocolate lab Chester was attacked by Blue while out walking, with my wife Heather. Blue aggressively charged Chester, attacked him, and forced him to the ground. The dogs finally separated, and Heather and Chester walked home with Blue, stalking them until Mr. Hitchcock picked Blue up and took him home. While there were clearly indications that Blue's mouth had been on Chester, including saliva, we did not see any blood and plan to report the incident to the animal control officer. As part of a previously scheduled appointment at our vet about a week later, the vet discovered 4 puncture wounds. There were pictures of that included in the letter. I have attached pictures taken at the vet on the second page of this letter for your reference. We reported the incident to the animal control officer, and as part of a follow-up, it was discovered Blue was not current on his rabies vaccination or town registration, and we were informed that Blue was going to be quarantined and have additional restrictions, including being tied up whenever he's in their yard. I was surprised and frankly disappointed that not only did she not make an in-person inspection of Chester once we indicated he had been bitten, but also declined our offer to share a vet report or pictures. I also understand Blue recently attacked our neighbor's dog Moose last week while Blue was on a walk. I understand and appreciate the need to give a dog and its owner an opportunity to be retrained and some time for remedial efforts, a chance to work. But based on these 2 recent attacks that included broken skin, other attacks I learned about given our experience in October and November, and a history of aggressive behavior, I would think it's time for Blue to be removed from town.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Just understand that we've had a problem with our audio, so I'm hoping that's getting adjusted.
Somebody reported no audio.
No audio on CCTV.
And they said they're working on it.
So, anybody else in the room before we go back to? Okay.
My name's Rebecca Todman. I live at 176 Central Street, and I can refer to the man who just spoke. I found Blue in my front yard on that same day, and I was looking for a different dog in the neighborhood. I tried to first make friends, and then I was going to walk him home because I had dogs. Figured he was loose, but he snarled and growled at me, and then I realized, oh, this is not that dog. So I got him to follow me to his home, but as soon as I got near their house, he started chasing and barking at me, and I ran up into a neighbor's porch, and then I saw Blue cut across the street from the house that he lives at, and in just a few seconds I heard screaming and barking, and that's when Chester was attacked. And I ran to the side door of the Hitchcocks, and their son went and got his father. He ran out of the front door. I said, your dog's out, and he didn't know the dog was out. And I guess, I just wanted to let you know that. And I live about a block and half the way, or a block.
I guess I'll go. My name's Beth Marianis. I live at 149 Central Street. I've lived here for about 3 years. I came from New Hampshire. In New Hampshire, I wasn't afraid of the bears or the foxes or the moose that would come through my yard. But
I must say that the dogs at that home terrify me. I've tried to, being new here, I want to meet everybody in my neighborhood. I think that's wonderful, and it is a great neighborhood. And I've tried to introduce myself and build rapport with the family, and I haven't. That hasn't been accomplished, except the children are the boys that I've seen out talk to me and say hello, and that's wonderful. There was one Sunday morning, I was walking my dog to Cousin's Field, and the boy had two dogs. One was on a leash, one wasn't, and one dog charged my dog and me, and I yelled, "Please get your dog, please get your dog, my dog's afraid," and he tried, and I said, "Is your dog gonna eat my dog?" And he said, "I don't know." Well, I just hightailed it home and was quite shaken up about that. But I don't walk down the street, the fence shakes. I think the dogs are going to jump through the screens and the windows. I'm terrified of all the children playing at soccer or at Thoreau's school. I can't imagine what would happen if a child were injured or walking through school. There's so many kids around. It just seems like a liability, and I love dogs. I've had dogs my whole life, and this is more scary.
Okay, thank you. Is there
I just wanted to make a comment.
well, is it specific to the dog?
Yeah. Shelley Amster on Prairie Street. So our property abuts the home, and we've been there before they were even there. And we have not had a personal incident, but that fence is so scary because it's so wobbly and chewed up, and we don't use our backyard. And we do have a dog. Our previous dog wouldn't even go out there unless we were with him, just to hear the bark, because it's scary. But to live that way and not wanting to use your own property after 20-something years, they're nice people, and I don't want to cause any trouble. So we haven't really ever spoken up about confronting it, but we just avoided using our yard until the end. We could have put up a high fence like our other neighbors had to, because they stopped using their yard. But our other two neighbors don't like fences, so we were trying to respect that our yards all sort of go together because our properties are so small. So I just wanted to say that we haven't had an incident, but I'm afraid I don't walk near there. And I wouldn't subject my dog to that kind of fear. So I just think that the fence is the issue. And the dog is, not, the back door is always open all winter, all summer, so the dog can come and go. I have never seen it on a leash, but if it's set, might not be able to see it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room that wants to speak?
Sean Miller, 165 Central. So does everybody realize how close this animal is to Thoreau Elementary? It's a stone's throw. That's point number one. Point number two is we called a couple years ago. Blue was going after a special, there's a guy in the neighborhood, he's maybe autistic or special needs, he's in his 20s or 30s. Blue was going after him, and we called the police, and I found out it was not recorded. So my other fear is that many things have happened, and I'm kind of hearing this right now, that may not have been recorded with the town, and the liability that could be going on.
Is there somebody else coming up?
Aaron Waddell, 200 Central Street. I have a 9-year-old yellow lab that I walk through the neighborhood on a daily basis, and I intentionally avoid Chase Road to avoid interaction with that dog Blue. 2014, 2015, one night I was on my front porch with my dog. We have a screened-in porch with a glass border, and the dog was being walked off leash, and he must have caught whiff or heard me and my dog on our porch, and he came directly onto my property and really kind of like scratched up the glass because my dog got curious and he looked at the glass, and then the dog came like right up, and I felt like he was gonna break the door down. So, ever since then, I just avoid Chase Road altogether.
Thank you.
My name is Julie Miller. I live at 165 Central Street, and I was the one in December that was walking, and Blue snatched my dog out of my arms and grabbed him and shook him. He did have a couple puncture wounds. I took him to the vet. I think you've heard plenty of stories like that. What I am questioning, and I don't know who should answer this, I think it's been clear that a muzzle order is needed. What I'm concerned about is the history and the problems with enforcing these orders, and what's the best way to keep people safe. And how do we go about that? Because there is a history here, and as you can hear, there's been fines, there's been reports to animal. The other interesting thing I'd like to report, when I called the dog officer, and I told her about what happened, and I said, I believe this dog has a history, and she said to me, there's no history on that dog.
Seriously?
She said that to me.
All right, let's just stay with that.
And
Yeah.
I knew that there was. And then my incident happened in December. The one I was referring to happened in October. And I said, I know of an incident in October. And she said to me, oh, that one doesn't count because it didn't puncture. So I'm concerned about who's overseeing this process and what can really be done to make some changes.
Madam Chair, could I just make a comment? The reason we're here tonight for the hearing is because the animal control officer requested this hearing to have the board consider her recommendation. But citizens at any time can approach this board and say, we've got a problem in our neighborhood with a dog, we would request a hearing. The board makes that decision whether they'll schedule a hearing similar to this, but if somebody comes in and approaches the board, I think they would listen carefully to any argument that there's a problem with the dog, and they would take appropriate action.
Is there any other comment, testimony? I know that there were some other questions from the board. Mike, did you have a question?
Yeah, well, first is procedural, when do we close the hearing first, and then, I just don't know.
This is the first one
I
for
would
me.
suggest you leave it open. There may be some more give and take with the animal control officer or officer,
We
Lieutenant
want
Ryan.
to keep it in the hearing.
Yeah, I have questions for the animal control officer, if you come on. First question is, when, I've forgotten which citizen made the remark, but it had to do with the dog not having rabies vaccinations. Did you know about that?
At that time, no. But when I did find out about it, the dog was immediately vaccinated before I would sign off on a quarantine.
Okay. When you started the testimony tonight, you made a distinction between a dog that was dangerous and a dog that was a nuisance.
Mm-hmm.
I heard a lot about a dangerous dog.
And as you can see, a lot of these have not been reported to our office, whether they didn't feel that they needed to call animal control or the Concord Police Department. That I can't answer. I only have what I have on file, and the 2 dog bites that I have on file. In a perfect world, it doesn't make a dangerous dog. I understand everybody's opinion, and this is why I've called this meeting and asked to be heard.
First of all, I made sworn testimony, it's my opinion.
Right.
So now that you've heard this testimony, do you have a different point of view about it?
I would have to reevaluate. I don't even want to answer that right now.
Can you help us understand, if we were to agree that muzzling the dog and keeping him on restraints whenever the dog leaves the
And
house.
the fence being installed.
And fence being installed. If that fails, what is the next step?
If that fails, the first offense is a $500 ticket. And then if it happens again, the second offense is a $1,000 ticket. After the third offense, if it occurred, the dog is to be immediately euthanized.
And when you say an offense, that would not require a bite or anything, it would just be
If
off
the dog
loose,
is
out of
just
control.
even out loose.
Yeah.
without
If
loose
the dog
or
is,
without a
yes,
muzzle?
because that's why we're here to put the full permanent order on the dog. So if the dog is out after this order is in place, if the dog is out, they're gonna get a $500 fine. And they're gonna get their warning. That's first offense. Second offense would be a $1,000 fine. Third offense, the dog would need to be immediately taken away from them by myself, assisted by the police department, and the dog would need to be euthanized at the owner's expense.
And at any point, if the dog got out and did bite somebody or bit another dog, you could bring back for a hearing on dangerousness, correct?
I could bring back, I wouldn't even need to do that. This is something that, I know
I'm
this
just
is all
saying,
new
just-
to you guys.
I can
and-
understand that people might be a bit concerned that it takes 3 situations.
I understand.
My concern is that if there's one kind of serious situation where.
Then we will be back here deeming the dog to be euthanized immediately. If anything happens, when the restrictions go into place with the fine amounts, you can put into a stipulation with your legal counsel that if this dog does bite, it's to
So we
be
can
immediately
add-
euthanized.
I just think it's
There's a
important
lot
for
of
the-
structures
the
that
owners
go
of the
in
dog need
between
to kind
that.
of understand the situation
Yes.
as well, so, thank you.
Did you wanted to ask another question?
To ask questions? I just wonder with all the testimony here, the problem is.
Tell us who you are again, please.
Oh, I'm Rebecca Todman. With all the testimony here, the dog gets out without anybody's knowledge in the house. How would he be muzzled? That's the problem, I think, is primarily the dog is out of the house, he's not in the backyard, he's not leashed. How would a muzzle be on him before he escapes?
I understand.
Well, as I understand these, this recommendation is twofold. It's that the muzzle is whenever the dog is outside of the house, period. And that the fencing that would go around the property would deter the
It would
dog.
be a 6-foot fence.
The dog could not escape it, I don't understand.
And that would be
I
inside.
understand that, but that would be the requirement.
Correct.
Well, all the required hardware to make it a self-closing,
Right.
locking fence.
Correct.
So I would suggest the board consider setting a deadline for completion of that fence. It might be hard to do that now with the ground frozen to set posts and that sort of thing.
The
but-
Hitchcocks have been in contact with fence companies. There's nothing that can be done at this immediate time because of the ground. So that's something I'm working with and.
I think it should be part of the board's order to set a
Exactly.
deadline for
They
completion
give
of that.
the-
So
the
what would be,
completion
what
date.
would be a reasonable date? The ground should be thawed by April 1st, certainly, so maybe April 15th.
That sounds fine to me.
Some years.
That's, as long as the ground is accessible to put into the new fence.
And then what's the nature of the fence that you're recommending? Is it a stockade, 6-foot stockade fence?
6-foot fence, correct.
So I would make that part of the order as well.
And in the interim timeframe, how does the dog, if the dog's in the backyard, how would it be contained?
Right now, it's being contained in the backyard by the fence that's there, which we all know is inadequate.
Right.
Right now, it's on a cable runner and has the
Is
basket.
the cable
muzzle.
runner new?
Yes, brand new.
Okay.
And there's not been any incidences since that muzzle order?
No. No. And I've been continuing the muzzle order every 14 days until the board decides to make it
And I assume the runner is
6 foot. It's a
Okay.
cable runner.
Okay.
It will hold up to 200 pounds.
And keeps the dog away from the fence?
It's 25
Yes.
feet in the backyard. You know, it can't get over the fence with this cable on it. No way.
But it can still go up to the fence
It can go up to the fence.
and bothers the neighbors.
Can you just help me understand, will a muzzle prevent the dog from
Biting.
Biting only, can it still bark?
It could still bark or
I
growl
didn't know how
if it
it-
wanted to. The muzzle goes, it's a basket muzzle,
So
and it
it's
goes
wide.
over the dog's face.
Okay.
So it goes up and over like this, and it's held on too tightly.
Can the muzzle, can the dog drink
Through the plastic muzzle, yes.
Through the plastic muzzle?
Yes. It's a very hard coated plastic muzzle. They're used for all kinds of dogs.
And has the board heard enough testimony for the, oh, I'm sorry. But please come to the microphone and. So we are just out there. Yeah. In fairness to those who are watching.
I'm Nancy Potter on Francis Street. I know we're at a formal board hearing right now, so maybe things will get done with this, but I just remember 2.5 years ago, I had heard they're gonna do a fence, and you had told me, I just met with the policemen, and we have this plan for them, and there was a runner then. You had a runner then, you were like, they have him on the runner. I mean, remember when I walked my dog, he was in the house, and the door was open, ran out the house, and jumped the fence, so it's sort of like, they're gonna have a muzzle on him in the house. It's just,
This will be a legal order.
yeah, that's the only thing, like, this has been a few years now, and I just hear this, they're gonna do a fence, they're gonna have a fence. And there's
Right,
no
and-
fence.
This is why we're here, so that they can order the
I know.
fence.
It'll be a legal
I
document.
just, nothing has been done.
If
That's why.
this order went into effect, and before the fence was put into place, remember, you've already heard about what could happen.
Right, I understand
If the
that. That's why
dog
I'm
gets
just-
out the back door, I mean, all those
Right.
things happen in this intervening period of time, and something happens, you've already heard it, you know, there are 2 fines that go into place, and then a third, or something could happen immediately. So, yeah,
Okay.
this is once it's put into
Because
place.
I know, I remember her telling me 2 years ago, they get a $50 fine, they just pay the fine, they have no problem, they just pay the fine, and so.
We can't help what happened 2.5 years ago.
I know, but nothing, that's what,
Now
I'm
there'll
just
be-
frustrated because nothing, I don't have my
Opinion
dog
order.
now, and that I'm still hearing this is going on. That's
This
frustrating.
is the first time we've been
Right,
before us.
The need for a stockade fence in the Thoreau Elementary School neighborhood is ridiculous. That's one. Number two, I'm
Could you tell us
very,
who you are again? please?
Sean Miller, 165 Central Street. That's ridiculous. Number two is, the safety of the kids in the neighborhood, I'm fearful.
Got it.
Hi, Heather Swartland, Prairie Street, Chester was attacked. That's great, a fence might go up. The dog's not gonna be muzzled in the home. The dog gets out through the back door often. I've seen him in my yard, hopped my fence several years ago, went to the bathroom in my yard, was in my driveway when my son was walking home from Thoreau School. My son said, "There's a strange dog. I'm a little scared." Mom, okay. Then Chester gets attacked in October. I'm not going to sit around until April for something to change. That being fined might, okay, that's, I guess all you can do is just pay a fine. This dog could continue to attack me when we're walking through the neighborhood. I mean, if the muzzle is, I don't believe in muzzling a dog inside a home. I mean, I'm a dog lover. I've tried to give Blue some chances here, but I get it, not every dog is perfect. But I just don't see, there's a couple loopholes here that leave room for in the next couple months for some more incidences.
It just strikes me that if this had been brought before the board 2.5 years ago, I can understand. What's happened since it's been muzzled, as I understand, there hasn't been a problem. There's been action that's been put in place, albeit from your all point of view, and I perfectly appreciate it. It's been put in place, and we're doing what we can now. I don't see that at this point, is sort of the choice that we have. We've explained that there are a lot of options. If you see the dog out, you're gonna call, that's gonna come before us. There's gonna be action taken. Very likely, the dog will have to be put down. I think the owners of the dog may not have appreciated kind of public sentiment to the degree that I'm sure they do now. So, I appreciate that, people wish things had, nobody should live in fear in their neighborhood. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Exactly.
But it hadn't been brought to us, and it's too bad, because I wish we had been able to do something 2 years ago.
Well, I thought it was under my understanding, another neighbor had submitted a letter to the town manager a couple years ago, so. And we really were trying, as the dog officer stated, I mean, we went through a few years of no problem,
Yeah.
so we said,
Well, you
that's
have a
it.
board in front of you right now who
I hope-
understands
Appreciate
the
it.
issue, and whatever action we do tonight, that's where it'll be. And if that doesn't work, there'll be a swift response.
Right. I understand that. Let's just hope something works.
And I have a question I want to ask Chris. Chris, I don't, as I said, I've never been at one of these before, so I don't exactly know what I'm talking about. But we've heard a number of times about it continuously open access to the yard for the dog. Is it in any way appropriate for us to include in our order that open access has to be stopped? That the doors to the outside must be shut? I mean, they may be locked, but I don't think dogs can open doors.
Well, we can make sure the condition includes, self-closing. It's like a swimming pool fence. It has to, it's spring-loaded, it has to close on its own and latch.
I think
The doors to the
yeah.
house.
The doors to the house.
So it does
I
make it
don't know
out.
anything about their house.
You could address maybe putting slide locks on the top of all the doors.
So that the dog is only allowed out under supervision onto the lead with the muzzle on.
Correct, and that's something that you guys can decide and add in. You can add,
Okay.
any
Putting
type of
locks on- putting
stipulations
locks
that
on-
you feel,
locks
a
on-
slide lock.
They're doing it good if they leave the doors open.
Right, it sounds like the dog has gotten loose accidentally a number of times, and if it's not muzzled in the house, it's gonna get loose without a muzzle on,
And
and,
even being fair to the dog owners, I mean, the dog escaping out of their house without their knowledge, even if they're trying to be complying with the law,
That happens all the time.
Well,
Not in this particular case, maybe, but it happens a lot.
and that should be reported to the police department or the animal control officer if the dog is, after this order is issued, is seen at large, with or without the muzzle, but not under proper control.
And if I could just add one more thing, and I don't want people to think this is I'm being wrong about this, but if anybody has any issue or wants to address a problem regarding this dog, all calls should be going through the police department. So I know I call people from my cell phone, people save my number, then they call me. I will tell you, I'm probably on my 5th cell phone in a year. Sometimes I get the messages, they fall in lakes, I'm on the road working with animals all day, the phones get lost, so.
And part of the
you know,
reason
if-
is the calls get lost.
The
So
calls
the
get
date
logged
and
in
the
that
time.
office, because if somebody leaves me a voicemail and I don't get it, and then I feel I'm being accused that I didn't call someone
So
back.
you get your orders from the police department, not,
She gets requests. from
I
the
get
police department.
requests.
That's correct.
Yes.
I'm sorry, not.
Orders.
Dispatch, she gets
I
dispatched.
get
to the-
dispatched from the
Right.
police
But
department,
my
they carry a
point being-
pager, when they need me, they page me, I respond.
Okay.
Does she work for the police department?
Yes.
Was there another question? I saw somebody in that
I
was.
don't think I got an answer to my question.
So I don't know how you prevent the dog if the pizza person delivers the pizza and the door is left open and the dog runs out. I don't know what orders you can make to prevent that from happening. But
Well, the testimony that I thought I heard wasn't an accidental leaving the door open after a delivery, but I think I heard a couple of folks say that it was, and it would be in my house too, I mean, leave the back door open so the dog could take off and get a hayfield and run loose. So it was more, it sounded like they left their back door open on purpose so the dog could have easy in and out access to the house. That's as opposed to.
so, and you could order that practice be
I
discontinued.
interpreted it that they have children, and the children are coming in and out and may not always be as cautious.
Right.
And I think that the children are gonna have to be trained to be very, very, very careful, because they obviously love the dog and don't wanna see anything
Well, I
happen.
think there ought to be, if there can't be, I think it's called an order in here, if that's what it is. I think there should be some kind of a language in there that the owners understand their responsibility to keep their house secured so that the dog does not accidentally leave the house. And so we can't make them shut the door, and I get that, because especially with kids, but what's the point? But we ought to have some language in there that acknowledges that they really have a responsibility, because I think it would be a shame on both sides if the dog just left the road because they want some air or something like that. It's
Maureen Giza, 245 Central Street. I think a valid point that should be made is that everyone who's gotten up to speak in this neighborhood is a neighborhood that we're all out all the time. And a lot of us are walking our dogs. We have the opportunity to walk our dogs many times in a day. And the neighborhood's only so big. And to avoid one street in a small neighborhood is stating a lot. The question has has there been any incidents since this has been brought aware? And I can say that I have 2 young puppies that we walk many times a day. The dog just hasn't been out. So if you were to weigh statistically how many incidents there were when the dog was let out in the backyard compared to the dog hasn't been out at all, we don't really see it, so there hasn't been any incidences. And to avoid hearsay, my mother does work at Thoreau School. Is there any way to approach the school to find out? Because I have heard over the years that the dog wanders the school during school. So no one has spoken to that because there's no specific evidence of that. But I think to bring that into awareness is that there is someone at the school that has seen the dog wandering the property.
We did contact the school and we talked to the administrator and the office staff there, and nobody recalls an incident with it, that they could call somebody reporting the dog, so we did check with them, but if anybody does that information, if they want to document it, they can report it to us.
Perfect. And just a question, 3 situations before it gets drastic. Who is going to outline that it's a situation? If it's just a phone call, does the dog officer have to actually have the dog in hand? Does the police have to actually have the dog in hand? What is going to be a situation?
I think if it's reported to the police department of the dog, we're going to investigate. We're going to try our best to determine whose dog it was. If it was that dog, then the violation's going to be issued, and then it'll probably be brought back to the
And if
attention of the
somebody
board at that
sees
point in
that,
time.
it needs to be reported immediately,
I
not
understand-
3 days
I
later.
understand the woman's point though, in the sense that, I'm sorry for forgetting your name, but the dog goes out without a leash, that's or without a muzzle, that's a
Without a
violation
muzzle.
in the yard.
And being leashed in the yard.
This is we
No,
want.
I understand
Yeah,
what
we
you're
want to
saying.
do so anytime the dog goes outside.
Let me finish, okay? The dog goes out without his leash or is off his runner, whatever that thing is called. That's a violation.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Well, by the time somebody called you and you had a chance to get somebody over to find out about it, the dog's in the house.
Yeah, we're gonna investigate it, and if there's an eyewitness to it, we can still file a violation. I mean, it's you have a witness account for it.
Presumably somebody would have called because they saw the dog running, whether the dog was back home by then or not.
So you don't have to
No,
visually.
no, we don't have to. No,
So there doesn't have to be
most of this
purpose.
information hasn't been.
It has to be somebody asserting it.
Right, no, I'm just
I
saying.
think almost every incident here wasn't something that was witnessed by the police officer or the dog officer. It was something that was reported to us, it was investigated, and then it was documented. You know, we
Sounds
did.
like a fairly distinctive dog, too.
Yes.
Sounds like you wouldn't miss it.
May I ask the question again? What's to guard us in blue,
Name, please.
James Hitchcock, from false accusations and the lack of evidence you need for this is, because there have been several, more than several, I think, kinds of police have called us through the years.
The police have great experience and doing an
I mean,
investigation.
I know, but-
Wait a sec, please. Have an investigation, listening to both sides, making a determination. I have full faith in the police department.
Okay, I'm just saying, we have received
I
calls.
appreciate your concern, but, you know, there's gotta be some solution.
I get it, I just, you know.
We're not requiring somebody to take a photograph necessarily, but if somebody's got a cell phone, it's easy to take a click. But I would leave that up to the police.
Rachel Hitchcock, Chase Road.
Could you come up to the mic, sorry?
Oh, sure. I just, for clarification, as far as reporting, like if someone were to just call and said they saw Blue out, is that considered a violation? If
Yes,
there's nobody
that-
else,
It would be investigated.
but if there was no other.
The police will investigate it and they will make a determination.
Okay, I guess just want a little clarification, but just in case, like, let's say it wasn't Blue, if it was just mistaken identity.
And that would be investigated, and if it was proven to be blue,
Right.
that was.
Okay,
Then it's
that's
a
fair
violation.
enough, I just, I wanted to have a little clarification on that, because I didn't know if like, someone calls coming and
Yeah.
saying Blue's out, and it's not him, so. Thank you.
I'd like to ask the chair to close the hearing aspect so we could discuss it. I think we've heard plenty of testimony,
I would second that.
but it's not a motion, it's your decision.
Oh, okay, then as the chair, I move to close the public hearing.
I would second that.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. So, we have a suggested remedy here, initial remedy, which is the, would be to make muzzle and restraint.
The dog is outside the house. That there be a fence installed. A fence installed, how would that be mid-April-ish? Depending on weather?
No later than April 15th.
Let's make April 15th.
Weather dependent.
Well, no, if it turns out that the weather is some kind of compromise,
You could petition for
then
a
we can come
extension.
back and we can.
That's good.
And if the ground is soft earlier, we'll give
Sooner
them
the
a-
better.
Yes.
And that there be some mechanism installed or in place that prevents the dog from pushing the door open if it's closed from the back door into the yard. So there's some mechanism that are hard to close. I don't think I want to prescribe what that is. I don't know enough about door locks and options or door closers to prescribe an option, but I think
I
something that would
frankly
keep the
would
dog.
leave that to the owners. I think they've gotten the message of how important this is, that there's not be an accident.
Right.
I assume that it would be an accident, not something intentional on their part of Blue got out. So I don't think we need to, I think they are gonna need to make sure that children are aware of the seriousness of this. 'Cause my guess is that's probably the situation in the dog gets out.
And then in the intervening time, when Blue is out and not going for a walk, Blue's on that.
Muzzle in the dog.
That restraint or the cable. The cable.
Can I ask one, I'm sorry. Is it a matter of the statute of the law that there has to be 3 violations?
No, I think if there's a serious incident and the board determines that the dog needs to be destroyed or banished from the town, I think is another option.
You can't banish a dog from the town,
You
it's
can't.
automatic euthanization.
Okay, so that
What
has
would
the same effect.
banishing be anyway?
Banishing would be moving the dog from to another town, and it would not be allowed in the town of Concord, which you cannot do that anymore.
So our only option would be.
Your only option would
So-
be to have the dog euthanized.
If the first violation of your order is a serious one and somebody gets bitten and you feel that that's
It would go from being a nuisance to dangerous, which would allow our capacity to do that.
And would that violation come back to this board or does it remain with the police department?
I think the board would, to destroy the dog, the board would have to make that decision.
Does have to make that decision.
And if a violation occurred and it went into the police department, the police department would contact us.
Yes, right away.
The director of public works informs me that fence companies usually can get started on doing fences like the one that's being done here by much earlier than that. So I would suggest we move that date back from April 15th to April 1st.
April 1st,
or
okay.
March 31st.
I think we have a comment from the.
Can I just make a comment?
Yes,
I know
please.
that the fence, sorry, I don't know why I'm involved in this. Just for the, I think the help of the applicant, or the owners of the dog. Fence companies that many times around April 1st are well out from a production standpoint, and it may put these folks in a position where they're contacting them now, and they tell you they can be there, May 15th or June or something like that. It may make more sense to enter into a contract and provide some evidence of that contract with an installation date by April 1st, and that way it kind of allows you to make sure that everything's in place prior to.
Thank you.
It's fair to them because they don't get themselves in a pinch at that point.
That's a good
Did
suggestion.
you guys also want to include in the motion acknowledgement from the owners regarding, I don't know if that really sticks, but.
Acknowledgement.
Number 5, confirming that they accept the responsibility.
Why?
I think that's,
They verbally have them.
police department.
They have verbally accepted the fact that they've got
That would
an
be
issue
nice,
and they're
but
going to address it.
I think our order is one that they are required to comply with.
Absolutely,
But I'm glad to know that.
yes.
Before we take a formal vote on this, I just want to acknowledge that I am a Jerome Elementary School neighbor. I don't know the Hitchcocks, I don't know Blue, but for the purposes of this hearing, I don't think my objectivity is compromised. I happen to live a few streets away. So, in fact, I've never heard about this as a neighbor. Okay. Well, we have, in front of us, we have an order, and the only other option in front of it that would be available to us would be to euthanize the dog. And I don't sense that that would be something that, well, we have something in front of us that would be a strong step in containing, look,
I'm also encouraged actually by the fact that since the muzzle order, there have been no violations, that the owners are taking care to muzzle the dog, keep them under control.
and if the dog isn't going out, well, that's,
He's been going in the yard on the cable. The dog's been in the yard on the cable.
yeah,
The only people that are allowed to take the dog out for a walk would be Jim or Rachel.
okay.
And
Is that
the
stipulated?
reason why the neighbors may not have seen the dog out for a bit is because the dog was on quarantine, and we've kept the dog on quarantine. The quarantine was a 10-day period quarantine after the bite in December. So that's, I'm just showing that they have been abiding by everything that we've been telling them to do. I've been speaking to them on a weekly basis along with Mr. Morahan as well. So everything has been on point right now.
And the only bite incident that involved a human was the one pizza delivery incident. So no
Absolutely.
children have ever been bitten.
I have nothing on file with a child bitten, no.
Right. Because that would change the
Absolutely.
conversation.
Absolutely.
So,
I would like to amend this to, Steve, I think, has been keeping notes of the kind of amendments, but I'm also interested in both fairness to the neighborhood and the owners, that nobody walks that dog but the adults.
Correct.
It sounds like it's big enough and could kind of get out of control, maybe wouldn't bite anybody, probably knock somebody over. I never saw the dogs, no.
outside of the property.
Yeah.
Outside the property, right. Are there any other?
I think I got it.
You think you got it?
But I do have to say, you know, in my last couple of months as a selectman, or select board member, this is the type of hearing that no select board member would ever really wish upon themselves and the public to have to experience it. I think there's a candidate in the room as well running for office, and she's able to experience this.
Yes, please keep running.
But I think we do take this very seriously. I hope the owners understand that we're trying to work. I mean, nothing alienates you from your neighbors, from personal experience, that your dog is not create situations where you and your neighbors become, you know, you don't have a great relationship, and it's a very scary situation for the folks around you, and I think what you have to make your best efforts to try to do what you can to minimize the risk to your neighbors, and I hope that the owners will do that, because I think in your own heart that you're trying to do the best for your family and your dog, you're also doing the same for your community. So, I mean, in that vein, that's my approach to kind of this motion. It's providing the best safety measure we can while still giving folks a chance to really give Blue that chance to.
And that's what this is. This is a chance. This is, and in a perfect world, it'll allow everybody to maybe find a lower level of fear and tension in the neighborhood.
So can you read it?
I move to follow the Animal Control Officer Condon's recommendation and issue a permanent restraining muzzle order for the dog Blue, owned by Rachel Hitchcock and James Hitchcock of 15 Chase Road, along with the following conditions. That one, that only Rachel or James, the adult owners of Blue, are allowed to walk Blue outside of their property. That that they are required to set a completion date for fence construction as soon as conditions allow, and evaluate those conditions no later than April 1st. The fence should have self-closing hardware and self-latching hardware to prevent the dog from getting outside of the fence. Do we have anything else?
The locking door, the back door of the house.
Oh, and the owners shall also provide door hardware on the built structure of the residence that prevents the dog from inadvertently or accidentally gaining access to their yard.
And the fence was to be 6 feet, I think. I don't know if that was.
6 feet stockade.
6 feet stop.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None.
I do think we should also thank all those who did come forward and testify. I know it's not an easy process. I do wish that this had happened a couple of years earlier. It probably would have saved a lot of people a lot of grief, but in the future, you know what to do.
I second that, and I second Steve's comment about this is not a seat that anybody wants to be in, and I know it's not a place that most of that those who came from the neighborhood wanted to come to, and I'm sure that neither of the Hitchcocks wish to be here tonight. So I really hope that the police don't hear anything and that we don't hear anything. But if that does come to pass, this will happen swiftly.
We hope the best for Blue.
Absolutely.
No.
there'll be seats for everybody in the room.
You get a seat, you get to watch it make yourself.
You get to watch the way we can go sit anywhere that's comfortable for you. Video's comfortable.
Okay. On to the next order of business. We are continuing our discussion of the Punkatassett parking situation. I know that we've got, we trained the Director of Public Works and Julia Kay from the NRC here to describe or remind us all about the options that they have put together. We were all last here to discuss the Punkatassett parking opportunities, I guess about a month ago. It seems like both just yesterday and a long time ago. And as I think we said then, going into winter, there was no need. I think that we were in a meeting at the neighborhood's request, and I think the neighborhood had made a strong case for a wait and see or let's take things in measured steps response. Obviously, it's winter. It makes anything other than plowing unlikely. So I want to refresh our memories about what largely a quick sketch of what the NRC has as an option, which would be behind Monument Street down the easement, and then what Rich Rain had offered as I think a modest step in terms of parking, and then we can discuss, where we are right now. So, Delia and Rich, you want to just refresh everybody's memories?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Would you like to start with the NRC process?
Why don't we talk about the Punkatassett piece, or the interior piece?
Sure, so you just want to talk about where the NRC landed
Yes.
the last time that they discussed that. So I didn't make any of these electronically, but this is a copy of the trailhead plan. And I don't know what the best way for you to see this is, if that works, but this is Monument
That works
Street.
very well.
Does it?
I
So
have no
Monument
idea if
Street
you can
is
see it
here.
on CCTV, but
We can see, we'll
we
hold
can
it
see
up
it,
afterwards.
yeah.
So Monument Street is here.
Yep.
This is the Apthorpe parcel is here. This is 851 Monument. You? That's thank you.
I never like to be on camera.
And this is the one of the accesses into Punkatassett. So it's 28 feet wide, winding out to 50. And this is the existing entranceway currently. So what the NRC has determined is a feasible solution would be to construct a parking lot here at the trailhead. The existing sign, the Punkatassett sign, is, I can't locate it right off the top of my head, but it's in this vicinity here. And that was where the NRC had sort of ended. This would need to be tweaked a little bit so that it was as visible from the road as possible. And then, as you know, the neighbors have come up with an alternate plan.
Right.
So that's where the NRC
This
has.
is just for everybody's memory's sake.
What was the distance from Monument Street to the edge of the parking lot?
400 feet.
And the number of parking spaces that were proposed?
12 on this proposal.
And would there be a handicap site?
Yes. So 11 spaces plus 1 handicap.
Was there any calculation or estimate as to the cost?
There was an estimate when we were looking initially at the parking along the easement for also 12 spaces, and that was about $50,000. It would be likely very similar to construct for a cost estimate for that location.
Is it an easement or?
It is not an easement. This is land that's
Access.
owned by
Sorry,
the town.
I
Access.
And that's an important distinction.
The only difference between where you were on this and when we have the site visit out here is that the parking lot would be moved a little bit to the right, which is facing the entrance to make
Correct.
it more visible from the street, right?
Correct.
And losing that, I forget it was an oak or whatever it was.
Right, that's dilapidated pine, large pine.
Was there gonna be any lighting?
No lighting.
All right, and
So,
Drain?
Rich Rain from Public Works Director. I think in your packet, you have a couple different scenarios. CPW was asked to develop parking scenarios and cost estimates for various configurations. In your packet, we have two. One is a 6-space configuration, and another is a 14-space configuration, so that you can see the spots are numbered 1 through 6, and they front the 851 and 873 properties, as well as there's one just on the other side of that driveway at, let's see, 903. That's the 6. We also have a cost estimate that we've put together for that. Please also bear in mind, these are concept plans. We don't have any instrument survey. We have very minor, there was some instrument survey done as part of Delia's project, so we were able to pick up some of that. But as we, if we were to move forward in this direction, we would get actual ground survey for this whole area, and we would be able to, engineer this plan. The plan assumes that all the work is done within the public right-of-way, meaning there won't be any easements necessary. If you look at the county layout, it's kind of tough to tell, but the county layout plan that we have, I'm sure you won't be able to see this. This is the county layout plan right here, and you can see the lower dark line is the current stone wall, and you can see how that lower dark line comes out of the actual right-of-way in certain areas. So, so we know, our best guess, that the wall as it currently is configured is not 100% within the right-of-way, but the area that we're really focusing on, 1 through 6, is for the most part contained within the right-of-way, and most of that work can be done within the public right-of-way. We would need access agreements in place, or temporary, easements or access agreements to construct that. And we would think that for the spaces 1 through 6, it would impact all those smaller trees. So there's trees anywhere from 2 inches, maybe up to about 8 or 9 inches in that area. Many of those would be impacted. There's 2 large white oaks there. One of those oaks would be put tree protection measures in place and save that. The other one is kind of built within the existing stone wall. We would try to save that, but the likelihood of being able to save that tree is pretty low. But that would be our goal. The next config, and also let me call them on that. The cost estimate that we put together, and as I said, this is an estimate at the planning level. We have about a $86,000 cost for spaces between 851 and 873. And if we were adding that space number 6, we'd be looking at about $94,000. The primary cost is attributed to the stone wall construction for that, removing that, resetting it in a different location, setback, so we can have spaces on that area that would allow for full access, and it would actually, I think we have those as 10 by 20 foot spaces, so large enough to have some room on both sides if people were getting out of the back on the non-street side of the vehicle. The other configuration that we developed was the 14 space configuration, also in your packet, and you can see the various iterations of cost based on the number of spaces, and we also put a aerial map in there, actually a street view map in there showing what the impacts would be to the trees and some of the other impacts to the facilities, such as the electrical cabinets and where some walls would be located. It's kind of, in that area, you would have a wall that would be would act as a retaining wall to flatten that grade out. You can see on that first pictorial that we have, there's several trees that would have to come down after utility pole number 76. That grade would require a small, probably 2 or 3 foot retaining wall on the front side. So basically you would have the area would be graded level with the roadway, and you would have a wall. Then it would switch, and there's a section probably about halfway if we were to continue beyond space number. It's probably right around space 11 or so, where we would basically take the top off of that trapezoid because it's fairly flat on the backside. It rolls down, and we would have a retaining wall on the backside holding those spaces up. And depending on how much reveal you would want on that wall, it could be anywhere 4 or 5 feet, 6 feet maximum, I think is what we'd be looking at. And then the costs are, as I said, laid out on the backside, or actually I think we have a separate page for that, and we're looking at anywhere from the same cost for the 6 space up to 200,000, 616, and like I said, concept level numbers, we get more firm numbers once we engineer the plan.
Okay. So, for an additional 5, what am I saying, for additional 8 spaces, go from 96 potentially to, is that 200,000? Okay, all right. And I know that we received a note from one of the neighbors today concerning the fact that their your expert had not had a chance to come in here. That was not the purpose here, it's just to remind everybody. I think we heard your plans at the last discussion. And I think that the purpose here is just to remember where we are in the conversation. And also to review the access, how it's gone this winter, what the experiences are. It's not clear to me that the board is looking to make a decision tonight, other than reminding ourselves that these are the two directions we can go in, short of status quo. Or Nora, feel free to join. Oh, she's got. Is it? This is only if you have another plan to describe alongside these. Right now we're framing it.
I do understand. My name is Nora Murphy, and I live at 873 Monument Street, and I'm a member of the Punkatasset Parking Study Group. And I presented to this group on December 4th, along with some other members of our group. And I simply wanted to speak, and I appreciate being given the opportunity to do so, to say that we only became aware of this meeting occurring Friday morning, as far as I know, since Jane and I spoke. And consequently, I contacted Daniel Dulowski, who was the engineer we worked with, and we had offered on December 4th for him to come and also speak to you and provide some of his insights, because he is a certified engineer. And given the very short notice, was unable to attend. However, I am here if you have any questions and need some refreshers about our plan. I realize that wasn't part of your agenda, so I'm not going to jump right in, except to simply remind you that we emphasize taking smaller, inexpensive steps, and I'd be happy to clarify and answer any questions that you have this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Norm. So,
Why can't we make a decision today?
well, it wasn't on the agenda as a decision making. It doesn't mean we can't. I think one of the points of discussion that certainly occurred to me is that since we began, if you go back in history as to why we're looking at parking at Punkatasset to start with, it was one of the recommendations we accepted from the Estabrook Woods Access Study Committee over a year ago now. And we were looking at then either joint management or some kind of use of the Apthorpe property for a parking area. That didn't come to pass. And since that time, a number of other things have occurred within the Estabrook Woods as a whole that may or may not impact parking as it is, in other words, they would not have been anticipated when the Estabrook Woods Access Study Committee rendered its guidelines. As a liaison to that process, I can certainly say that where we are right now was not envisioned at the time that those guidelines were recommended. So, what we agreed to do at the last discussion was to take a wait and see and to appreciate the neighbors' request for a go slow or do it in phases approach. That's what brought us to today. So,
I just have a couple of questions. You're comfortable that this parking plan, or either one of the parking plans, provide for sufficient safety for people who park there and are going to use the Punkatasset?
Yeah, we designed it in accordance with all the AASHTO guidelines, MUTCD, also the site distances that we looked at, stopping site distance from the other memo that we provided. I'm sorry, did you catch that?
Yes.
Okay, so I know, we were sensitive to what the chief of police had said. We wanted to make sure that we provide adequate off-street parking without vehicles overhanging into the roadway, and this accomplishes that.
What length of time do you estimate it would take if either one of these went forward in terms of getting to completion, so people would be able to park there?
It could be completed, this upcoming construction season if funding was in place.
And while you're doing the construction, would that impede traffic on Monument Street?
We'd have probably an alternate lane configuration at times. There's a fair amount of work that's off the roadway. Tree removal we'd probably need some access easements and temporary access to some of those properties to work off the road. There's plenty of room behind the trees, but from the neighbors, exactly. But there's certainly work that would have some upset to that traffic at inbound lane that we would have to have some alternative.
Require police details?
We would.
Are those costs included, the police detail costs included?
Not at this point. These are high-level numbers at this point. It's, we don't have.
Signage and other issues that are.
Well, the signage, we have the variable message boards that we would put in place, so a lot of those are costs that we already would absorb through the department. But the overall, just to give you a sense of order of magnitude, what that cost would be.
And I assume, Delia, you would have similar, that your 50,000 anticipated similar costs?
There's no stone removal that would be associated with that?
No, I'm just saying in total. I don't know whether there'd be a police detail necessary because it's behind.
Right.
But
Probably
impact on actual access to Estabrook Woods through Punkatassett over a season would be?
Would be constrained at that
Right.
location.
Right, okay, so could close.
For a period of time, I don't
Right.
know how long that construction will
Okay.
take, it's, a month.
So, I sort of agree with Steve, and I don't know whether we can do it tonight, Steve, but I think we owe the public a decision, that we need to get on with this. So I have a procedural question. Procedural question is, our decision is only to decide whether or not we are going to approve the plan that Rich has put forward, one of them or something like that. Essentially, because the right of way is something we have jurisdiction over and we can make judgments about that. Not so for the NRC,
Right.
that's their judgment. So, the thing that we will decide is whether to accept or reject the proposal that's been put in front of us to create this on-street parking. If we say yes, then I suppose we go forward. If we say no, then it would be back in the jurisdiction of the NRC to go forward with their proposal. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Are they mutually exclusive, or could we decide that both are possible? 6 parking spots on the street and fewer inside Punkatassett? I'm just curious, you're playing it, you're describing it as an either or option, I'm just
Most
wondering.
of the proposals we have in front of us, I suppose anything is possible, but we've been going back and forth about 6, 9, 12, 6, but
Yeah.
things for a long time now.
Right, we have,
We've
so-
heard from Public Works how they could accommodate the need following the Estabrook Access Study Committee. We've heard from the NRC how they could accommodate the recommendation. I don't want to get into, just personal, I don't want to get into trying to come up with another 5 or 6 options.
No, I wouldn't go, I'm not suggesting we move to further options, it's just whether these are mutually exclusive.
Well, I think one is
decisions.
our jurisdiction, the other is not. I mean, so we can't vote to tell the NRC not to do that. But we can vote to do the on-street parking, I would assume, but they, that they would therefore abandon the proposal to do the off-street parking, but that's.
But in taking, I think, understanding Alice's question, if we decided as a select board to approve the 6 parking spaces on Monument Street, that piece of it, and that didn't satisfy the Estabrook Woods Access Study Committee's guideline or request of 12 plus, it was 12 to 16 spaces, that could be taken up, that could be filled. The only other place we could go, if we had chosen to limit it to 6 on Monument Street, would be, at this point, into the NRC. Right.
Our recommendation could say, we wish you would come up with at least X spots so we'd be in compliance with the recommendation from the study committee, but that judgment is there.
It's no longer in our hands as a select board. The other piece of this that's obvious sitting here is that these will have budget impacts, and they're not included in our current budget. And so I'm assuming what we're talking about is something, I don't know where that would come from.
So it goes to town meeting as part of the capital budget for the next year, is that true? So it has to be approved.
Well, or, and I'm not going to speak for the town manager, or the town manager could say, well, I could perhaps come up with X, and I don't know what but given how tight this year's budget is, I suspect that. So that's a procedural specific. My concern about tonight, Steve, is that we've heard the recommendation from the neighbors, which is an on-street parking configuration. And if my memory is half with it, there were some concerns raised at the hearing we had. One, we didn't have good cost estimates yet, not a fault of anybody, we just weren't there yet. And there was my recollection, there was some concerns about the size of the spots and how many you could actually get in there. So I would like to I want to hear from their engineer.
Right.
And I want, if it's possible, I want the town to weigh in on. I don't want to just hear from the engineer. I want engineering plans that Rich can look at the way he's looked at this plan and say, probably would say, well, we would say he's professional. Come back and say, yeah, we could do this, and we think it would cost this, or no, we don't think we can do it, we can only do that. So.
We have to have an apples to apples to apples comparison.
Right, I mean, I want, the neighbors have gone to a lot of trouble.
Right.
And we've got the town that's done a good job coming up with alternatives for us. I want to get the same level of detail about the neighbor's proposal as we got about the town's proposal. So we can look at them and get the town's professional opinion about it. And then I would encourage them to make a decision and get on with this.
And has the NRC, the commission, changed their, like, is there a preferred preference?
I think at this point, they're in a holding pattern, and if the select board decides that, there's parking that can be accommodated, that they will, likely abandon the trailhead parking. The question about the number of spaces is something that they would need to evaluate, because it's not.
Because the commission purview, I'm just looking at the trail map, and I think you guys kind of know about how our town loves to access land that, is under conservation restriction. I don't think, I think your department and your commission are kind of the stewards for that. So if there's a recommendation you guys may have, I'm kind of curious to know your preference based on maybe experience at, there's so many sites that are lots at other wonderful places in town. So just comparatively wondering what the commission was thinking.
I'm wondering, will it be possible to provide the Ponkatasset committee with copies of what we've been provided so they can have their engineer take a look at it before?
Part of the agenda packet for it's posted on.
Yeah, I thought it was also available for the public hearing.
Useful if their engineer could review.
It was our packet.
It's online right now.
Yeah. So it's available.
So, I'm sorry, are you asking if they're the NRC's engineer?
No.
No.
Misunderstood.
No, the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Rich, on your scheme, were you planning on doing any road markings on the paved surface?
No, Steve, that would be probably, some stone dust base, so we wouldn't do any road markings there.
Okay, that's good.
But we would leave plenty of room for pull-in parking in certain spaces. We would kind of shy away. People would parallel park, but we'd leave adequate room for that maneuver to take place.
I just also want to remind the board that we heard quite a bit of public comment that indicated that they felt that 6 spaces was insufficient to meet the demand.
Well, it was smaller than was recommended by the study committee too.
I'm just, when we see this breakdown of the costs, it's obviously easier to afford and invest in 6 spaces, but it may not meet the demand or interests of the public.
Hi, Ellen Emerson, Monument Street.
So everybody on CCTV, if there's audio yet.
I get to see my Mo's procedure. Just on the road marking, I know we had talked with Rich about putting a white line to mark the travel lane, and we were told that couldn't be done until it was warmer weather. Is that still in?
I'm sorry, Ellen, I thought they were talking about markings on the actual spaces.
Maybe.
No, I was curious, were you planning on like a
Oh, like a
dash?
fog line or
Yeah.
something. I'm sorry, I didn't follow that question. Yeah, we would be able to do that if that's what the final design, incorporated, and that's what we wanted to do. Yeah, but we typically wouldn't do that until, temperatures are at least about 45, 50 degrees.
Right, I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, thanks for that.
I think that would be a good
Yes.
idea.
So, I don't know how to exactly proceed. The question I'd like to ask, so I don't know how this works. I'd like to ask the neighbors when they will have drawings, I'm asking you at the same time, drawings about their plan that are in sufficient detail that the town could make an assessment about them, when that could be available. So that's the question
agenda,
We can
right?
get it on the agenda for a particular date.
Nora Murphy, 873 Monument Street. The short answer to your question is I don't know. Daniel Dulaski is the professional who has the qualifications to do that sort of drawing. I do have a clarifying question for you as to the level of detail. So Rich Ryan had explained that these are concept drawings rather than engineering diagrams. And so are you requesting a more detailed concept drawing from our group, or are you expecting that our group pay to have, surveying and engineering analysis done of the site as well?
I think the drawings from DPW are very much in line with your consultant's ideas. And then he had some speed mitigation, tools that he wanted to implement before and after, or as you approach the area, right? I mean.
Well, I would ask Rich, Steve, what you've seen.
Sure.
The
I've seen the drawings. I think one of the bigger issues was the standards that we typically would design a parking stall around. We have standards 10 foot by 20 foot, 9 foot. Where it is and what type of parking it is. We weren't able to discern that from the drawings that he was providing because it was a plan that wasn't to scale. Yeah. And when we were asking those questions, I think we heard at the public hearing they might have been 7 foot wide, if I remember that correctly. And that was something that, maybe I misunderstood that, or maybe I didn't hear that correctly, but we'd want to know what the widths are, we want to know what the spacing is, we want to know how that plan that he has is located within the right-of-way or outside of the right-of-way, what his plan is for the reconstruction of that stone wall, those types of details. And we'd be happy to have a conversation with them offline if that would be, give them some guidance on that. The largest issue I can remember is the space width was less than what we were recommending, and I think he.
How wide are the spaces?
Ours are 10 by 20.
I think that
It's not debated, but the issue is here, can we request that the neighbors have their engineer be in touch with Rich and for them to talk through the various plans and come back to us with how they do that.
So just to, I'm sorry?
You could probably do like a WebEx conference.
Yeah,
Right.
certainly. Is he local?
Yes, he's at Northeastern University, and he lives south of Boston, so he's very nearby. So just to clarify, Daniel Dulaski can get directly in touch with you,
Okay.
and you can explain to him the specifics of the town needs, both in terms of the retaining wall, should it need to be moved partially or fully, the width of the spaces, the length of the spaces, other considerations that you have in mind, and you can share those with him.
I think we would just have an offline discussion about what his design, kind of concept is, and some of the drivers that he sees as are necessary. But, so those are the types of things we would have a conversation with him about.
Okay, great. And then he can, based on that, then he can prepare a revision to our concept that we had presented in December that meets the standards so that you can compare apples to apples, as someone said a little while ago.
Right.
And somebody from your group could be in touch with the chair and let us know when we're ready to go. We'll get back on the schedule.
Okay, great, and perhaps an evening when Daniel Dulaski can be here in person to answer
that would be the
specific
goal, would be to
questions,
find out.
rather than all of us who are not engineers. So,
Great.
okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right. That's all. Okay. We are going to hear from Dana Baggy from our Chamber of Commerce. Thank you very much, Rich. Thank you very much, Delia. And thank you, Punxsutawney Chamber. I still want to know what happened to your arm.
He told you.
It was the Eagles. As long as it wasn't on a horse.
And you didn't call it PT either.
I think my colleague is driving me as well. It's been a fascinating meeting.
Okay, for the record, just introduce yourself.
Jane O'Baggy, the Executive Director of the Concord Chamber of Commerce. Kevin, would you like to join me up here?
Sure. Thank you.
State your name.
Kevin Thomas Plotzik, and I'm not the executive director. She is. I'm the president of the board of directors of the chamber.
Right.
Thank you.
And you requested an update on the chamber. So I'd like to share with you our consent information this afternoon. I'd go over 4 points: the mission statement, the management structure, membership, and then our strategy for moving forward in this coming year. The chamber has had a mission statement that it updated, dedicated to promoting and serving business, supporting tourism, and fostering a strong economic climate within Concord. Slight modification from previous ones, but it's the same one that is pretty much builds on ones in previous years. The management structure. We have a 12-person board of directors. Category, that's how they classified themselves when they submit their membership or update their membership. If you combine different business categories, the groupings change a little bit. We have, the largest group would be retail, and that comprises about 32 different businesses. And they're combined because some of them classify themselves as flower shops, some classify themselves as clothing, some classify themselves as bikes. So it's a broad variety within the retail market. And then the second largest category combined is professional and business services, legal, architects, insurance. And then there's a smattering of many others underneath that. In terms of our business focus and strategy, we have been looking at this, and we've actually come up with sort of a 4-pronged approach. We will continue to conduct There'll be networking events. In fact, we're planning to have one this Wednesday, but we'll have to wait and see if there's a storm or not. It looks, driving here, I heard it's going to be a little snowier than we had anticipated, so we may need to cancel that particular meeting.
Can I, the business after hours this week, which has been going on, I'm woefully ignorant. What does that mean? I mean, I understand seminar, the things that you're gonna add this year, but I don't know what the general category means.
Every month, we have a networking event for the members, and we call it Business After Hours. It has historically been one where you go to a retail business or you go to another owner's shop. People from the chamber come together, they introduce themselves, they talk about what their business is, they exchange business cards, and they have just a general networking fun time. We've gotten feedback from our members that it'd be useful to engage in some more discussion and sharing of information so they can learn some business tips. A lot of the other chambers in the surrounding area offer their members opportunities to learn some business skills, some additional information. We kind of played around with that last year, but we're trying to do that a little bit more this year. For example, in March, we are having a seminar, if everything goes well, with 3 businesses who've been quite successful in Concord. And we've asked them to share with the members their reasons for success. What helped them really launch their business in Concord? What helped them sustain their business in Concord? And what were some of the things in hindsight that really made a big difference for their success in Concord? We think that a lot of the businesses, especially those who are relatively new at Concord, might benefit from that. So we're going to try that.
Who's going to speak? Who do you have planned to speak?
The 3 that we've asked would be Nishadek Architects, Deborah's Natural Gourmet, and Orange Theory Fitness. And they're a brand new startup. So sort of a different one. If it works, it's successful. We hope to expand that, maybe focus one on retail and a few other business groups. But 2 of them obviously have been long-standing businesses in Concord, very successful, totally different market focus, but nevertheless they have a nice story to tell. And Orange Theory Fitness is brand new and they seem to be having a lot of success, and so as new businesses come into Concord, maybe there are some things that they've done or that particular business did to help them really get established within the community, and maybe others could leverage that or take it and use it. So that's what we're planning for the business after hours. And we'll continue the networking one as well. The second one is to promote the chamber members. We've always done that, but we're trying to do that a little bit more over the next year. We started our new member program, and for new members, they can either have a ribbon cutting ceremony with the board of the board of directors, and they get their names in an article, or if they don't particularly want that activity, we have a write-up in our email, and we posted it on their website a little bit more about the business so members get to know who they are. We also want to try to promote what businesses are doing. For example, the Concord Adult Education Program is a member, and they sent me their catalog of courses, and I posted that so kind of people get a little bit more aware of what the different businesses are doing. And then if there are different stories that come up or different things that people want us to share, we're planning to do that. We'll do it through emails, we'll do it through our website and our Facebook pages. That's how we're trying to promote the businesses a little bit more. And then our third category is really trying to implement more of a business advocacy platform, where we're hearing the concerns of our members, listening to them, analyzing them, and then as a board, with the board discussion and consensus, well, what should we do to try to address this particular issue that the businesses seem to want to have addressed with the town or whomever it happens to be. We just engaged a little bit of that last year, and we're trying to do a little bit more of that this year. And then the fourth area, and it touches on, which we really appreciate, taking over a good portion of the tourism activities for Concord. We still get a lot of calls. Who's open during the winter time? And we'll continue to answer those questions and provide them information as we can. I mean, a lot of times they, where can I stay, or what train station stops? And so, I'm not going to direct them to the count. It seems crazy. Just answer the call when it comes in. So those are the 4 areas that we're planning to focus on through 2017, 2018, because our fiscal year starts November 1st.
Well, it would seem to me that under the business advocacy platform, that would be a place that there might be a lot of interaction opportunities with the select board or other boards and committees in town. I immediately thought of a number of issues we've seen in front of us, from parking to, we talked about the fact that they'll be resurfacing at Hyde Road a number of larger parking areas that affect Concord Center this summer. So those are, I think that it's, those are
our members have very different views on certain issues. And how do you kind of represent them when one group feels strongly about one issue and another group, on the same issue have the exact different position? And, we're there for all the businesses, so we're gonna have to kind of navigate this area carefully because,
That's still very important for us to know.
No,
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, I'd be curious as to whether there's an issue with, say, broadband, whether you feel that there's a need to upgrade the broadband in Concord. I also would be interested, the Committee on Disability is planning to do a map which would show stores that have access, handicap access. That's something that it seems to me the chamber could do. And I've been kind of frustrated that the chamber's been, almost in the cloud. I don't know where they are. And I wish I'd love to see more involvement.
those are great examples of issues that we could put our arms around.
Well, what are your members telling you are issues?
Well, they're very divided on the issue of parking. I did go to the public hearing on that one. There are some that are very, you know the whole story.
I know the parking issue.
There are concerns about the two lots, although I was very pleased to hear earlier you saying they're going to pave those, and that would be very nice. There's the issue, just to get it on the table, the issue of the role of retail within Concord is still an issue. There are some businesses that have some concerns about it and others that don't. And trying to figure out why is sometimes a little bit difficult.
Let me just separate, the role of retail within the chamber or the role of retail within
Concord.
Concord?
Some businesses are doing well, some are doing poorly.
Well, I know, and I understand that, I guess because part of what I'd like to sort of throw the tennis ball back and say, you hear a very eager select board. I would love to hear a chamber grapple with, a list of priorities, whether or not it represents, subsets or not. But, to receive back from you, what are your topic list? Because, you're gonna see agendas come from the select board which have issue, I would love it to be, this is a dialogue that could be articulated well in advance. Doesn't have to start at a select board meeting. And, the role of retail, that seems to me, that's almost an existential question for Concord. In most towns, exactly, I don't know that that's.
Yeah, I think Jane is saying, I guess hoping that, and I know the business partnership has already sort of indicated, but be more of an advocacy group for businesses in town here, a way for us to really understand. We have a lot of groups in town with interest, but I think having a group like the chamber and the business partnership, actively informing us of what the issues are. Sometimes we hear about them, sometimes we don't. I went to a ribbon cutting of a new business in West Concord, with you, right? And it was done by Metro West Chamber of Commerce. I thought, well, what's this all about? It was very nice, nice store. So my hope is that if you could see yourself and your members as being part of the way that the town becomes informed about issues that could make Concord a better spot for all kinds of retail businesses. And you see yourself as really an advocacy for those folks.
I agree with you. I don't think the role of retail really should be the question you guys should be putting on us. I think you're there to serve your customers who are retail owners. There's only 15,000 people in Concord. You gotta get those 30,000, 40,000 people interested in coming to our retail shops. you gotta find that energy, whether it's social media or just getting the word out. And it's not just local, it's you're trying to expand their outreach for them, because they're small, independently owned, they're working 6 days a week. They don't have that leverage, you know, where some of the larger shops have that leverage. Like Orange Theory, there's branches, there's a network, so they've got.
Right, they don't know marketing.
Right, but, you know, so they've got a model where they get the word out, the impact out, the energy out, and it draws people looking for that. And I think that's what we wanna see from the chamber, is that energy, just really amping up our businesses, our food and beverage, our retail, and advocating for them. So at meetings, you're here representing retail. Like at the parking meeting, you should be here representing them. You should be advocating for whatever bylaw changes that help, you know,
It
and.
would be important for us to, I think, a good question on a lot of these things when we're talking about things, of what is the chamber think?
Right.
Right.
And when we get an answer like that, maybe divided, that's the way it goes.
And that's okay. That's
You
okay.
heard tonight how citizen input is very important to us. And we did the parking ban over the Christmas time for weekends and whatever. I didn't get any feedback as to whether that was something successful from your point of view or not successful.
Right.
The styrofoam issue was gonna be a regulation. Well, you know, that would be something that input from you all in terms of how to do it in a way that was gonna be most conducive, so that it wouldn't be a burden on some of your stores and whatever. So, I mean, it's that type of give and take that I would love to see.
Well, and I would say that, you know, we have a number of ongoing forums right now. We have our long-range planning process, of which we have by deliberate choice, a retail member of, but I would want the chamber, I mean, I'm excited that there are 172 different business members. I would not have known that, no fault of anybody's, but I wouldn't have guessed that. And it would be really helpful to the long-range planning process if, even in categories, there was input into that process, because these are all interests in Concord's long range, I hope.
We did participate in the long-range planning process seminar or meeting.
I understand, but I'm saying these are examples, and I believe in that case, maybe our consultant went to the plan. I'm also thinking about last week's marijuana discussion. One of your members came and offered the voice of retail in the room. I'm not sure whether that discussion has been brought up within the chamber, but, you know, again, that's another issue for retail or.
Great opportunity.
And that is exactly what your member suggested. But again, these things come up in our, during the calendar year, there are many opportunities in which having the chamber at a select board meeting or in advance to think about it, to offer us a thought or an opinion, or to say, or better yet, if you've noticed an agenda item that you think your members would be interested in, get it back.
We take that recommendation and heard it. I think that's very reasonable. There are, my sense is, and I think Kevin would agree, that we can bring issues to you and we can give you sort of the sense of the members. They'll, I guess as you know, there's never a single view on these issues, but that's important to know as well, and we appreciate that, and that it's clearly.
It's not just reporting in, which is terrific, but it's also being involved with other committees in town to know what is coming down the road. So that it's not after the fact, we didn't know about this, holy mackerel, why are we putting parking meters here? But, you know, being attuned to what's going on in town so that you can bring the issues to your membership and say, hey, this is happening, and we ought to figure out what we think about it. And if
discussed this very recently, that this is a trend that or an area that we want to continue to go in, and we appreciate your support. It's been,
Like I say, every journey starts with a single step, so,
Or missed it.
But yeah, so many opportunities. I mean, you know, I think you always hear a lot about online business being a kind of a threat, and yet at the same time, Amazon is an opportunity, a revenue stream. So maybe you should teach our retail shops like how to participate in that and get your products on Amazon. So now your reach is national, it's international. You know, so that someone interested in a Concord product can suddenly, it pops up on that little iPad at home, and you're suddenly, you know, packaging something and profit without someone stepping into the store.
The vision here, just to keep in mind, remember, Steve is leaving the select board. There's a lot of energy here.
But yeah, it's you know, whether or not, is there a need for healthcare? Is there like a network? The chamber can provide healthcare plans because it's more people than just one company, you know, so there's a lot of ways you can use your leverage to kind of help them out.
well, thank you very much.
thank you.
And don't be a stranger. Okay. Brad, you're it. And in honor of our timing here, let's try and move, I will try to move us all through this quickly. I know that Heat Smart is exciting. Our latest opportunity.
So my name is Brad Hubbard Nelson. I'm chair of the Sustainable Energy Committee and the coach of our Heat Smart team. And okay, great.
Yeah.
Do I have to hit something and to?
You have to sit there.
Okay. You have a copy of this, and it's not that. Massachusetts Clean Energy Center had this program. It really suited us well. So it's a volunteer-based program, meaning that we run it along with. Well, we made a team with Carlisle and Lincoln, just to make things challenging. And the proposal, which was accepted last fall, was to promote air source heat pumps, and then we added ground source heat pumps and wood pellet boilers, what they call. Not to push the pellet boilers. They might be just fine for some people, for some houses. We've already learned a lot about all of these technologies in the last few weeks. There are three other groups that got selected. One's in Bolton Harbor, that's the closest with us, and we may share some information with them. There's also something in Great Barrington and Nantucket.
So those are the three others that won Heat Smart.
That's right.
Okay.
So the program begins at the end of this month and lasts to the end of July. So it's really a pilot program. It's getting started. We want to convince. We would like over time to have a lot of people transitioning from oil, especially, and high carbon fuels to low carbon fuels. And so we got a marketing grant that is split by the three towns of $6,000 a town, and in order to something like that near a home. And then these are the pellet boiler systems. Both of the systems we've looked at with their installers are made in Austria, and they are using wood that's pretty much scrap wood, but there's a growing industry of this. And then we're also, while we're in the homes, our installers will be able to prepare quotes for heat pump water heaters, because often when you change your heating system, it's a good time to change that as well. So we have a target number that Jan and from Jan's analysis of what we thought Concord could do for air source heat pumps in the 6 months, and a smaller number for ground source heat pumps. And CMLP's already put in a nice rebate for both of those, and we don't have a goal for the wood heating.
Now, I noticed that we're each getting the same amount of money, and yet our returns look impressively larger.
Well, we have more people, and that's proportional to population.
It's a kudo to what we.
We're gonna do the best we can.
Absolutely, good.
So this is the schedule. Right now, we're preparing the program to launch, and we've had a lot of work in the last couple of weeks selecting installers, and they'll be announced, I think, in the next week, following the very final check-ins and contracting with Mass CEC. That's been a very interesting process, and we're trying to just get outreach in every way we can, through the schools, through the town social media, through other organizations.
Are you working with our sustainability director? I haven't heard Kate's name mentioned yet.
She knows about it. She's involved, but we haven't been working very closely. This is, for her benefit. But we've talked to her about it. She attends our meetings and such.
Have you spoken to the trades at all in town? Or maybe feed off of the building permit list?
Well, we do have some helping us analyze data from the assessor's database, and they would from the permit database, but I don't think there's an online permit database. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, like a permit that gets issued or something.
If you want to make literature available to builders who's applying for a permit to build a new home would have access to any literature you might have about heat pumps.
We should.
Or just have any lobbying architects as well in town?
Yeah.
3 or 4. That's every wonderful.
Okay. I'm going to follow up on that. Thank you. Okay, so we're starting with.
Yeah, I guess so.
We'll be having our big program kickoff with a Meet the Installer event at the high school on I think it's a Saturday afternoon. It's a Sunday afternoon. And that's where we're planning that out. But all the installers will be there, and we're going to try to get as many people who are interested to find out about it take action. And then the town is being very supportive for us, because always has been. And let's see, it's a good fraction of CSEC's effort for the next 6 months is working on this. And the new rebates for the heat pumps and such. I don't need to list everything, but that's we appreciate the support, and we'll do the best we can to succeed with our goals.
So is there a time, March 4th? Do we know what time?
That'll be in the afternoon, like 2 to 4 or something.
Okay. And ignorant fellow here.
Yeah.
What's the average cost of putting a heat pump in?
Okay, so it depends what you're trying to.
Show up on March 4th.
Yeah. Well, if you're trying to do your whole house, that will be one thing, and it will be fairly expensive, but pay for itself over time.
Fairly expensive
Meaning, if you had to put in something with zones for all sorts of bedrooms and such, it might be $15,000 to $20,000.
And the payback period would be what, about?
Depends what you're burning now, and in fact, it depends very sensitively on the price of oil today.
Okay.
But it's in the under 10-year
Under 10
range.
years. Okay, that's, again, these aren't exact numbers.
But it's also about getting off carbon
Right.
based fuel,
I
right?
just-
So
I have
it's
no idea.
it's
Can
bolt-on,
box or-
literally bolt-on equipment that you put your condenser outside, you run piping through the building, and then you can locate fans throughout the house, so it's very easy to install. And then if you have a solar panel array on your home, your power, your, you know, I mean, we installed air conditioning, that was the primary, and then I didn't realize till, you know, one winter, if you're the first person up for a couple hours, you don't heat the whole house, you just use that to heat, you know, a room, and then, so.
We're selling it for you.
Right. No, I want to be.
Absolutely.
Well, that's great.
Thank you.
Oh, we need a motion?
Yes, we do. I'm waiting for you.
Move to authorize the town manager to sign Heat Smart memorandum of agreement by and between the town of Concord, Carlisle, and Lincoln, Massachusetts.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you very much, Brad. And thanks all the other members of CSAC who are involved in this. Okay, Rich, I think you're back up.
Thank you.
Reviewing, approving, or?
So, I've provided Rich Rain, Public Works Director. I provided a pretty detailed memo in your package that you've seen. It's a pretty complex situation, which I've described in detail. I think all the parties, you know, realize that at the end of this, we want a favorable outcome, and this is a favorable outcome. Interesting and complex. Since about 1941, 5 connections to the Concord water system existed in the town of Carlisle, and that was at the end of Monument Street, where there was a meter pit and a non-conforming water main, 4-inch main, that continued down Monument Street into Carlisle. The first connection was established by President Garfield's grandson. I think he must.
Presidential relationship.
Yes, his name was Mason Garfield, and he must have had some pull back in 1920 or 1930 in Concord because he persuaded the water commissioners to connect to his home. Keep in mind there was some changes in the town line since then. The town of Concord town line was actually further north on Monument Street, so there may have been. Well, pardon me. So there may have been some implication with the location of the town line, but over a period of over 100 years now, there have been incidents of water main leaks in that non-conforming main, as well as some of the services, and they've been repaired by the owners at each case. There was one issue with the meter pit, and the meter needed to be replaced as well, and that was funded by the owners. We've been working with these 5 owners for many years, but more specifically within the last 2 years in a very collegial way. They've been very helpful. They've been very interested in finding a solution to this, and we've worked to negotiate a solution based on this last leak they had in 2016, which resulted in a substantial amount of water loss. It was a leak that went on for several weeks, about 14 gallons a minute, and that actually then accumulated over time, and it resulted in a very, very large water bill being assessed to them. We talked to them when we noted that there was some unusual and consistent water use, and I think as we go toward our smart metering system over the next several years, we'll be able to see this immediately, and in fact, we hope that residents will be able to see that immediately as well, just by an interface on a cell phone or on an iPad. It's not uncommon. We deal with water leaks quite frequently, especially with irrigation systems. Those are systems that are underground and leak quite frequently, and it's not unusual that we will be requested for an abatement, back to step 1 rates. So in this case, you know, the 5 parties developed a plan to be removed from the town water system. That was one of our goals. We felt that the 4-inch main was in poor condition. It would have needed to be replaced. It would need to be conforming, upgrade to an 8-inch ductile iron main, and that would have been very costly. So working with these residents in Carlisle, they agreed through a series of milestones over a period of several months to come off the Concord system, and we negotiated with them in a way that we would recommend the forgiveness of that debt that they owe on the loss of water, which was significant, but I think it's quite small when you look at the larger picture. And abatements like this, I said, this is not groundbreaking. We have had abatement requests like this in the past, maybe not this large, but still significant. So the Public Works Commission voted to support the settlement agreement on January 10th, 2018 at their last meeting. And we respectfully request that the Board of Selectmen or Select Board do the same and authorize the town manager to enter into the settlement agreement with the parties.
Council has reviewed the settlement agreement?
They did, Chris. Yeah, they helped us develop that.
And about how long did this take to reach this agreement? Looks like a lot of really good faith effort.
We were working since 2016, pretty steady, meeting with them on probably every other month basis. There was papers that were being exchanged and reviews and council reviews, but yeah, for the better part of a couple years, and we got to the point. They're off the system right now. They've been off the system since November.
Okay.
All the 5 homes now have private wells, and they're no longer receiving Concord water. We've just done a final read, or we're about to do a final read, and the system is shut off. So the main at the end of Monument Street is no longer charged with water to these residents. So that's a good story.
Any further questions?
Great job.
Yeah, wow.
Thank you. It's nice to
Took
hear
us
it.
140 years, but
It wasn't
One president's grandson.
yeah.
That's quick around here.
Well, it's a good settlement, and it's nice
Yeah.
to hear it.
I move to approve settlement agreement as presented and authorize the town manager to enter into settlement agreement with Carlisle water customers.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
I'm hearing a wise request by a fellow select board member that in looking at the hour, and I hope that this will not go in too long, that we move the MSBA statement of interest in the middle school up to now. So you guys can.
Thank you very greatly.
I know that you're thrilled to be at a different board meeting.
But probably not at this hour.
But yes, just proving that we can make a select board meeting as long as a school committee meeting.
Oh, it was a competition.
Yeah. It's a showdown. So,
You can try going the other way.
Laurie, hold the mic over.
Karen, go ahead.
So this has been before you in the past. You voted
Name and.
John Flaherty, Deputy Superintendent, Finance and Operations.
Lori Hunter, Superintendent of School.
Thank you.
This is a repeat of an earlier process that occurred several months ago in the last cycle from MSBA. We are essentially simply updating the dates, a few minor terms in there, adding a few deficiencies that have occurred over the past several months. And we need to resubmit, and that requires both the Board of Selectmen vote and also a vote of the Concord School Committee. So you've seen the motion, it's rather lengthy. And it's a very specific form that the MSBA requires, so we respectfully request that you folks consider voting.
So I just want to make sure I understood, you said this is a resubmittal to correct some deficiencies in the original application?
No, we've added in some language about additional deficiencies that have occurred in the buildings.
Okay.
And
Straight to
since
the
we've said
document.
deficiency twice, I know that people are wondering what they are.
Well, there's been some additional heating problems that have occurred, some roofing repairs, but mostly to do with the HVAC systems and some of the
I hear there's a deal on
building
heat pumps.
Yes, I was gonna say, and I saw the word commercial involved.
One of the things we would hope to accomplish in the new
Or do
building.
the VRF system.
This is a resubmission.
To the MSBA for middle
Last year,
school.
it didn't make the
Didn't
top
make the cut.
15, as I recall, is that?
I think they selected 15 out of all the
Not
statements of
totally
interest across the
unexpected.
state. But
We want to make the team this year.
we were encouraged to resubmit again, and we're doing that in a very timely fashion.
Okay.
Good.
Who wants to move this fun one?
Go for it.
All right, I move to authorize the superintendent to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority the statement of interest form dated February 23rd, 2018 for the Concord Middle School located at 835 Old Marlborough Road and 1231 Old Marlborough Road, which describes and explains the following deficiencies and the priority categories for which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future for priorities number 2, 5, and 7 with with deficiencies as follows. Priority 2, elimination of severe overcrowding. This condition has been addressed by use of an elementary school being converted to use as the second middle school building in 1967. Priority number 5, replacement, renovation, or modernization of school facility systems such as roofs, windows, boilers, heating, and ventilation systems to increase conservation and decrease energy-related costs in a school facility. The 2 buildings that serve as middle school have significant capital requirements with roofing, HVAC, and other systems reaching obsolescence after nearly 50 years. Priority number 7, replacement of or addition to obsolete buildings in order to provide for a full range of programs consistent with state and approved local requirements. Having 2 buildings located a mile apart requires duplication of many services and increases staffing costs significantly. These funds could be used to improve the direct educational experiences of the middle school students housed in the Peabody and Sanborn buildings, and hereby further specifically acknowledges that by submitting this statement of interest form, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance or the approval of an application, the awarding of a grant, or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the city, town, or regional school district to filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
Good job. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And I see 3 items I'm hoping that we can go through quickly because I am also aware that we have both somebody here from our cultural district advisory, to discuss our cultural district advisory committee, and also somebody here to help us with the cable television advisory committee. So, not to keep our friends waiting too long, I understand, are we tabling the review of the
Yeah.
224 Patriot State.
Yes, they asked for a deferral, the Public
Okay,
Ceremonies
so
and
that's-
Celebrations Committee. They've worked on the motorized vehicle regulations, but they asked for some additional time.
Okay, so that will be deferred. And I see a consider time extension for a dog park feasibility study committee charge. I'm going to send that to you, Tom.
Well, that was a committee that is doing a lot of study, and would not be, I think they were proposed to terminate May 31, and I think it'd be prudent to extend it probably until December 31.
Okay, do I hear a motion?
I move to extend the dog park feasibility study committee to December 31, 2018.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And Steve? I also see.
Affordable housing funding, been meeting quite frequently. Great ideas are on the table. They're studying a multitude of options. They're planning, once those are prepared, they're planning to go to the FinCom and kind of have a meeting. We'll try to just convince them to have a conversation to help us rather than just say no. And I think they need to next town meeting, so April 2019.
Okay.
So I'm sorry?
Well, but they would have to have their work completed though, much earlier than that, if they were gonna have something on the warrant.
Yes.
But they still have to be a committee.
But they would want to be presenting,
Right.
or might want to present at town meeting.
Right.
So keep
Right.
them.
Okay.
So I move to extend the term of the Affordable Housing Funding Committee to April 2019.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
April
30.
April 30th, sure.
We can decide next year's town meeting right now. Okay, so, and that brings us to discussing a draft charge for the Cable Television Advisory Committee. And I just want to acknowledge that we had a robust conversation led by the league. Thank you. I see Diane Proctor, moderator, in the audience on Friday morning. And there was a lot of interesting engagement on the draft charge. It was circulated at that point, and that's led to a number of other conversations, which I know as a select board member, I'm not ready to sign on the dotted line on a committee charge today. I do want to recognize that one of the amazing assets that I know we had in town that surfaced at that meeting was Carlin, and I'm terrible with last name, so I'm going to invite you up here. We have she was not a cable commissioner, she's a direct.
I was the director of the competition division for the Massachusetts Department of Telecommunications and Cable in that
your full
capacity.
name
And my full name is Carlin Reed. I live at Wits End in Concord.
Yeah, okay.
And in that capacity of the director of the competition division, I was head of the cable division.
Okay.
In that capacity, I was essentially oversaw a part of the cable industry for Massachusetts. And it was a pleasure to be here. I have given you a couple of pieces of paper that I want to explain. And I'd like, if it's okay, to give you about a 3-minute session on Cable 101, if that's all right.
And this is important because as we discussed on Friday and have discussed in other settings, we've been looking at our relationship with CCTV, and I think one of the things that as a select board we've all acknowledged is that having a greater committee, citizen committee participation in our PEG access would benefit us all greatly. So that's sort
Absolutely.
of what led to this conversation.
Absolutely. The couple pieces of information I want to give you that some of the research that I've done in preparing for this meeting. Well, a question came up about the number of subscribers in Concord, and we have 5,840 cable subscribers. This is cable TV subscribers in Concord, and since 2013, that number has dropped just 2.5%. So there hasn't been a big drop from 2013 to 2016. In Carlisle, there are as of 2016, 1,512 cable TV subscribers. They increased 2%, so we lost and they gained.
We have broadband.
Broadband is a completely different subject. Broadband does not come into this equation at all because the franchise fee is based on the regulated fees, and the regulated fees are the cable fees. So that's one thing I wanted to make sure. For example, my personal bill is about $100 a month for everything that I get from Comcast, who's our cable franchise provider. Of that $100, $5 goes to PEG. $95 goes to Comcast for everything else, the fees, services, the whole works. And one thing that I'd like this commission, what I appreciate what this board do is focus on not just the PEG portion, but that $95 else of what the consumer pays. Under the statute that authorizes the PEG funds to be paid to the town directly, Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53, F and 3/4. PEG funds can be used for three purposes: supporting supporting the PEG. Second, monitoring compliance with the franchise agreement, which means monitoring consumer complaints and how well Comcast is doing its job.
Click the install button to get your local forecast.
And third, help prepare for the franchise renewal process, which means evaluating that performance. I've noted in doing some more research that there are at least 6 towns that have some public access, have some as public employees, some member of the public access studio, either the director or some of the personnel. Those 6 towns are, we know about Littleton and Somerville, but also Rockland, Hull, Agawam, and West Springfield. So Concord and Carlisle would not be just isolated. There are other towns that have taken some part of the PEG Access program in-house. With this information, I look at a couple things. Keep in mind the people who pay into the fund that supports PEG aren't necessarily the people who use the PEG, because we have, like I said, 5,800 subscribers, but we have, 17,000 people in town, roughly 8,000 households. So there's more people use it than actually pay into the fund. The other piece I want to let you know is every year Comcast has a rate case before the Department of Telecom and Cable, and that has been filed this year. It's DTC 17-4, that's the docket number, filed in October of 2017. We are regulated as far as our basic tier service, our basic equipment, and the maximum installation charge. Those rates are set by the department, not by us, but by the department. I expect that about May 22nd, the town will be receiving a letter from Comcast, from the department saying, there's a rate hearing. If you want to participate, you have to intervene and participate at this time. Now, that would be an ideal time, for example, if we had problems with how Comcast was providing service here, to send a letter to the department saying, hey, we're one of your regulated communities, one of the 120 that are left. We are having these problems. Please consider this and see if there's some kind of way that we can talk about it. This is an effective technique that the board, through this cable television advisory committee, could do. I've seen it work. Last year, it worked with the city of Peabody. They had an issue regarding their franchise agreement, and they were able to get it resolved very quickly because they brought it up to the department.
So this would be an additional value of having the citizen committee, i.e. speaking on behalf of Comcast services to Concord citizens as a whole, separate from PEG.
Yes, it's, remember, 3 purposes. PEG is one, the cable franchise enforcement is the second one, and then the renewal is the third process. So this is that second piece of it. And part of those complaints come through some of the documents that I've given to you today. The Form 500. There are 2 pages. One of them is the F500 complaint data. It has a list on the left side of several types of complaints. When a customer calls into Comcast with a problem, Comcast is supposed to record that complaint and then tally up at the end of every year how those complaints come up, and then submit that information to the Department of Telecom and Cable and to the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC. We're able to get that information and use that as a negotiating tool. I'm not sure the town of Concord has been doing it, but it is something that other cable advisory commissions, along with the franchising authority, which is the select board, could do as well. So that is another benefit that could be explored, and I recommend should be explored. And the last piece I wanted to touch on is reviewing your surcharge. 2 questions. One, the number of members of the committee. It says, this is on page 1, the committee should be comprised of up to 7 members. most charters I've seen actually specify the number of members.
Right, and keep in mind, this is a draft, a roving draft at this point, it's not a final piece, so yes, it would be a hard number.
Good, it'd be nice to know what the quorum is. And the second piece is that I believe the town has the ability to use a surveying device called SurveyMonkey to look for, to gather preferences from those users. That is a possibility that could be explored through this Cable Television Commission, having a survey of the subscribers and users to get a feel for their preferences, for what types of channels and what kind of cable TV services they want. Because it was apparent to me from our discussions last week that people are interested in it, but we don't really know who is watching, what they're watching, when they're watching, and that kind of information might be useful. So I would recommend that you consider doing a survey.
And again, I'm woefully ignorant here, but just to keep in mind, these options, this SurveyMonkey, you're suggesting we could determine preferences, interests, again, not just of the public, educational, and government or subscribers.
Not just of subscribers, but
of Comcast subscribers in Concord as a whole, and feed that back?
I'm not quite sure who actually responds to those surveys. I know, for example, the Light Board did one recently for a customer satisfaction survey. We're still waiting for the results on that, but whoever responds to that, I don't know, perhaps, Chris, you can explain to me a little bit who actually fills in those kind of surveys?
On the citizen surveys that we do every 2 years, that's conducted by a polling firm that has a scientific way of identifying, I think it's 400 customers that they want to connect with.
Okay, my understanding is that there is a 1-year period that SurveyMonkey is offering to the town as part of a contract.
Okay.
That was essentially free. You've got to use it, this is where you can use it.
Again, this isn't about SurveyMonkey, I'm just trying to look at who would be surveyed.
I think my point is that we'd be looking for citizen input
Right.
about what they watch, why they watch, what they don't watch, what's missing, what they want to see.
Right.
And that, I would suggest that go beyond subscribers, because many more people are watching online than they are watching on television.
Right.
And so that is a broader catchment than just subscribers.
Absolutely true. Now, that was it for my presentation. I'm available to answer questions, whatever you wish.
Well, this is a lot of information, thank you very much. I hope that you'll be available when we do form a committee.
Well, the first step is to form the committee.
Exactly.
Do we know how those 6 towns that have taken over, how any sort of feedback, how that's worked?
I have not explored those 6 towns, but I've been trying to identify other options, because I noticed in the charge you want to be able to compare how well Concord is doing to other towns. So that, okay, we know about Littleton and about Somerville, but there are others that do various parts. So not yet, but we can find that
I think
information.
comparison goes beyond the management structure. I think we're interested in knowing how we do, whether it's a CCTV managed
Structure,
event
right.
or whether it's town managed event. I want to caution us, I'm very interested, thanks for the information, but our focus is simply
The
on
committee.
the committee and on
Absolutely.
the PEG part of it.
And the PEG.
Other stuff about Comcast as a franchising agent we're interested in, but otherwise it doesn't have any impact here on this committee that we're putting together.
It would only if you did not allow the committee to do that work. And that's what I'm saying is, here's what a committee could do,
Right.
make sure your charge would allow them to do that. And I think what you have written here
Right.
will do that.
In other words, these are all responses to Comcast that Concord could be offering if we had the body that was interested in doing it.
We used to have a cable advisory committee whose role was to look at the complaints and evaluate them and help negotiate the franchise renewal agreement. But we couldn't get anybody to join that committee because there weren't that many complaints to evaluate. The franchise comes up every 10 years, so we really had trouble staffing that group at all. So this would be a group that would have a lot of other things to do in the meantime, and then when necessary, they could review those complaints and assist with the relicensing agreement.
I actually was on that committee, and I think I
Oh, really?
recommended to Carmen that the committee, we had really no function. There was also the negotiation But we hired somebody to do that, we didn't have the qualifications. And I recommended to Carmen that the committee sort of cease to exist.
Full circle. Okay, well, thank you very much.
I'm not a big fan of useless committees.
Thank you.
All right. So,
I'll just comment on
yes,
the
please.
draft, second draft. There was an earlier draft that Kate put together that focused primarily on the functions or whatever. This version follows our more traditional format. Actually, the CSEC was the template for, so some of the carryover up to 7 members was a CSEC term. So I revised it to apply to the Cable Television Advisory Committee, but used the more specifics that you would normally see in your.
Well, I'm glad we're funding this because I've been aware of it, and I still think the charge needs some additional language with some additional responsibilities delineated for the P part of the public access. Because we've heard all kinds of comments and this stuff, and I think it all focuses on that part of it. And I think we can at least give a good effort at getting some language in that draft that attempts to give them some responsibilities and duties that would help the citizens feel more comfortable with that aspect.
So,
and I think that one of the things that was really important about Friday's discussion was the fact that there is that much interest in Concord in looking at this. And so I think that taking some time to review the draft with greater attention paid to the P piece. I think we often spend a lot of time, at least here, thinking about the government component. It's our sore nut, but it doesn't make it the communities.
And again, we heard about a lot about the Comcast part of it. But my hope and expectation over time is that, there'd be a lot of other broadcast capabilities that don't rely on Comcast to get information out to the public.
Right, absolutely, yeah.
I think there's some great opportunities here, but if we want the citizens to support this, I think we need to be mindful of the concerns that are raised, and at least try hard to see if we can incorporate some language in it.
Diane, you have
Just a question,
a
actually.
burning question.
Yeah. Diane Proctor, 57 Sudbury Road, and I'm speaking as a personal, a personal question. Would CCTV board, as it presently exists with all sorts of expertise and perhaps additions, be adequate to serve in the very charge that Chris and the board is putting together? Is it necessary to remake an entire operation, and what might be the reasons not to work with an existing board that presently has both experience, history, and expertise?
Well, maybe people on the board would be good candidates to be on this one, but that's a board of directors of a 503C company.
Right.
And it's structured differently than the way Concord tends to structure its citizen-based committees. So I think if this is going to be a town department and has an oversight citizen committee, as most of the parts of the town do, that we want to adhere to that tradition, structure it in a way that had expertise and broad-based citizen input. And I hope we would turn to the committee for those who would be good experts.
And I would actually enter in and say, regardless of the structure, I think that one of the things we learned, or I certainly learned on Friday, is that the current board of CCTV, they're not as transparent as a lot of our boards and committees in town. I don't have access to that board in the same way that I have access to any of the other boards and committees in town, or people have access to the select board. So I think that, we're going through a change.
Mm-hmm. And could I just understand whether the select board has voted in a formal way to make this transfer from the 501(c) private organization to a town operation?
That's not on the agenda for discussion
And
tonight.
so that, but that decision has not yet been formally confirmed.
Not being
Okay,
discussed.
thank you so much. And I just want to say for the league that we really appreciate your attention to this. It's been it's been complicated and very interesting, and I really appreciate the way in which Chris and others have discussed this with us.
Any other burning questions right now? All right. Carlene, you get the most patient award of all. Thank you very much for joining us for not to review a draft charge, because we don't have one yet, but to discuss the research that you've very nicely done on behalf of us in putting together a cultural district advisory committee or committees.
I'm just Carly Hempel, Highland Street in West Concord. I'm happy to be before you again. I, right after our last meeting, tried to contact the MCC, but wasn't successful in actually connecting with them, despite attempts, I assure you, until Thursday night. So I didn't have time to get that, what's coming around to you. And so what it is just, they're just direct quotes. I didn't prepare an actual narrative for you. They're just direct quotes from Mary Jenkins, who is the project coordinator for the cultural districts, not just ours, across the state. And I've starred for you the ones that I think are most apropos of our conversation tonight. And the second page is what Mary Jenkins referred me to give to you, which is the actual language on their website that talks about the organization of these districts. And the short of it is, I explained to her our conversation and explained to her the question, or asked her the question of whether we should do one or whether we could have or should do two. And her answer was very clearly that that they should be two, that there should be two districts. And the reason, and I think where it says that most firmly is in the guidelines. It says, and this I'm looking at paragraph number 7. In the guidelines, it says that the municipalities must submit separate applications for each district. So it's not one district, it's two districts defined by being walkable and compact. If you had enough activity happening, you could have 4 or 5 districts all in Concord, but they would be operating as separate districts. And then she gave an example of Barnstable that also has 2 districts within driving distance, but they operate separately. And she made the point earlier in the conversation, you'll see the assets in those districts are distinct. And she made that point. They really get to know the community when they come. They spent a lot of time in Concord. And she made that point over and over again, that West Concord, for all, and Ms. Kaufman, I understand, for all of our talk about Concord being one town, one zip code, one group, and we all agree, but she very distinctly made the point that they awarded 2 districts for a reason. They see them as operating separately. And so...
Well, we had agreed to that. We would operate separately, but it'd be one large committee who took in the larger interests of the town. And they would be reporting individually as separate districts with separate work plans. It's just how it is administratively reviewed for a committee, a citizen committee. So we would have abided by all of her suggestions here. 2 districts, 2 work plans, 2 annual submissions. Just whether there's one committee or 2 committees.
Mm-hmm.
If we start off with 2, that seems to be laborious, there's nothing to prevent us from at some point consolidating.
Same thing in reverse. If you have one committee.
I think there's inefficiencies in the administrative of it, the business side of it, organizing,
Coordinating between the 2
documentation,
districts.
application filings. I mean, why teach 2 people the task of the process? You could have subcommittees that are doing the creative thinking and the execution, but the application process should be done with one person, because then it's like, it's the same steps, you know?
Well, I think that one of the things that I am still underwhelmed by right now is that we only see Carlene sitting here. And while we pull together a committee charge, whether it be one committee with the West Concord Junction subset and a Concord Cultural District subset, we need bodies who are dedicated to those two areas. Because I don't think we're gonna ask Carlene to divide and conquer, literally, into both places. And I know that we've mentioned this to Ms. O'Baggy regarding, you know, what the chamber has in its resources. I truly don't have a dog in this fight of two versus
Well,
one.
isn't it the case that whether 2-1, I don't
Yeah.
have a point of view on this, but isn't it gonna be, the language for the committee is gonna be the same?
The same, right.
So, I mean, let's get
the
something
language
drafted
together.
that we can agree to, and then if we have to cut it, fine. I mean, let's just-
And that's my assignment, so I'm remiss in not
But
getting
just
into
one
it.
draft.
Right.
I'll start with one and.
One draft.
I just want to reaffirm that that is not my understanding from the conversation. I spent a long time on the phone with her. I spent a long time reading this. And my understanding of this is that they awarded 2 distinct districts for a reason. And if you were to create one committee, you would be alone in that. There are other communities in the town, in the state, and they have distinct committees. So I'm not sure why you approved 2 distinct committees, but you want them to become one now. I don't understand.
Well, I'm not saying they become one district. For the cohesiveness of our community, we often hear that there's a disconnect between Concord Center and West Concord. And if the more that we do to separate our community in half, we do a disservice to the entire community. So my thinking was, by coordinating the efforts, both the 2, West Concord Cultural District and Concord Center, will have to talk to one another. So you're not
Certainly.
scheduling events on the same day. There's got to be some communication back and forth so that we can be synergistically looking at, you know, what's happening across our towns. But my interest was more in the effort of trying to continue our community as one community with really special cultural districts.
Right.
And that we want to see that cross-fertilization. We talk about, different times we've talked about having rail service that goes between West Concord and Concord so that we can have better communications and better flow between the 2 sides of our town. I personally, you can persuade me, but I personally would feel like I don't want to divide our town in half and have a separate group managing West Concord and Concord Center. But my board can choose differently. I'm only one voice and one member.
I'm not advocating a position, I just wanted to respond to a statement you made. The councils actually have not been submitting the applications or the renewals. Actually been the Chamber of Commerce that have been doing that. I just wanted to make that distinction. They haven't been involved in the actual preparation of the applications and the annual reports.
So, that's good to know, that the chamber has is gonna maintain the administrative function versus volunteers that we're asking to engage in greater efforts. I think that this probably makes sense to start with a draft of the committee charge, and with that, we might actually have a specific, I'd want to know, for instance, if with that draft in hand, if it was one charge, one committee, if that was a absolute no-go from Mary Jenkins. In other words, would that violate is that worthy of thinking further on? If she had something in her hand that she looked at versus the discussion over it. Sometimes people will take positions in discussion that if they had something in front of them that as Alice has described, you know, one overarching committee that had two very, very clear subcommittees. I don't know. I mean, you've had the exchanges. And if the answer was that doesn't work, then that takes the conversation off the table. And at the very least, once we have the charge in hand, we can either replicate it and call it according to the cultural district, or not. I would imagine the numbers of members we'd want per cultural district would probably be different if it was one with subs versus two distinct, so. But, anybody else want to weigh in?
I'm just hearing that Mary Jenkins has more or less declared that she very much desired to. And my feeling kind of, I appreciate what Alice is saying, but I think just because we have separate doesn't mean they're kind of antagonistic. And we have things like the White Pond that focus on, you know, one area. And I don't think that necessarily disassociates themselves from the whole. So I guess my inclination, I think a lot of if the application forms are largely the same, I think there can be an efficiency done to make sure that the two of them, you know, are handled in a more efficient manner, that they're not sort of totally separate, they're working together on whatever part of it they need to work together. But I'm hearing kind of that there's a desire. I understand that the two cultural centers are distinct. And the worry with one is that it's going to be perceived that one part of the two holes are going to get more attention or more desired attention than the other, and that can be a problem.
Well, they're just very different. As she points out, you know, you happen to have in West Concord a fairly high number of visual artists. In downtown Concord, there are a number of cultural assets or historically based buildings and organizations. So they are different. And also, I think with if there were to be funneled, the reporting requirements to be funneled through Jane would sort of solve the problem that you were mentioning about efficiencies and duplication of efforts. I also think it's a big ask for someone on that committee, like myself, for example. I hope to be on the West Concord committee, and I can't take on Concord too. I just couldn't do it. So, you know, I already do a lot, and so I don't know if I would serve on that committee if I had to plan, in all honesty.
I think the desire, clearly, if there were to, is that they would coordinate and work
I think
together
they have to
and
coordinate.
be stronger.
But it's a big ask.
We were able to build some of that into the charge.
The charge, right.
By creating a
Reporting.
liaison responsibility
Yeah. Yeah.
and articulating coordination and synergy.
Right. Sort of the planning board to the West Concord Advisory Committee, without the subservient role. They're two equals.
Absolutely.
So, but again, I think probably when we start to try and develop a charge, that may also inform us as to whether you can marry them or it's just, you know, to accomplish a West Concord Junction and whether the charge themselves will indicate.
I also think in Concord Center, there's already so many things happening that I don't think there would be much that would be created under the umbrella of the MCC organization. It would just, there would be a reporting mechanism. Whereas in the village, there aren't the same sorts of arts institutions, and I think more events would be created under the MCC umbrella. Do you see what I mean?
I may not agree with that statement, but I hear what
I'm
you're
sorry?
saying. I may not agree with what you're saying, but I hear it.
Which
There-
part of that?
I think that there are a lot of events in West Concord.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Lots of events.
Absolutely.
And maybe even more events than actually happen in downtown Concord.
I agree, there's a lot of events. There aren't that many public performances. and things
That's
like
one
that.
aspect.
And that's something that's really emphasized with the MCC and something that we emphasized in our application process. And something they said they really wanted to see. And we're creating outdoor spaces, the new plaza, Junction Park, and these are underutilized. And so it is my goal anyway to create a more public performance atmosphere there. And I do think that's absent there. But you're right, there's art walks and there's definitely things. But as I told you, we're having a concert series this summer, and there's all sorts of things underway.
I know that certainly, because I will work with Chris to develop this charge, I think it'd be really useful to get the application for both districts.
And I was actually going to offer it to, if I can easily download, you can't go to the website and download, you have to have a code and everything, the annual report. So
That would be useful,
just to
because that would
see,
give
they're
us
the
a-
same annual reports for each district, but you can
Right.
see the types of information
That's-
that they ask for. And the application is a little easier to download.
And I left her phone number here. And
Yes,
she's
you did.
invited you to call. So, you shouldn't listen to me if you don't want, if you think I don't know if I was agnostic or not going in. I felt like I was, but, I agree, Mr. McLean. I don't have my glasses on and I'm getting tired, but I did hear from her that she wanted to, but you should follow up on your own and make sure to check that if you're not sure.
Should I send the information to you?
That'd be great. If you
Okay.
send it to me, I can
Yeah.
circulate it.
I'll
Thank
do
you.
that.
And thank you, Carly.
You're welcome.
Okay.
The application for cultural district, Concord is older, but Concord Center is 2012.
Right.
So just,
West Concord is an upstart.
yeah.
Okay. Well, believe it or not, we're at public comments. Is there any public that wants to comment? Of course there is. One.
Diane Proctor, 57 Sudbury Road, speaking for the League of Women Voters. On March 18th, this was announced at the candidates' caucus at the end of January. But in any case, on March 18th, at the Concord Carlisle High School, in their Learning Center, from 1 to 3, we are holding an event called Candidating Forum, and that is a series of round tables where the candidates will move from table to table to table to table, and have an opportunity to speak with citizens who are gathered at those tables. They'll have an opportunity for a public, brief set of statements initially, but then they will move from table to table, and people will have a chance to have
I'm so excited about this.
a real discussion about issues and thoughts on their mind. That's a Sunday from 1 to 3, and we hope many will come and candidate with us. Okay, thank you.
How many hours is that gonna be?
1 to 3.
I bet you it'll go longer.
Well,
Does this replace the?
It replaces a formal candidates forum.
Okay, good.
Because as far as I understand, as of this afternoon, there are no contested seats. If that,
Tomorrow is the.
tomorrow I know is we weren't meeting tomorrow here, so I just wanted to get that out there. If somebody else does, then we'll have to change the format. But if it goes forward as it is, then that's the present plan. Okay?
Okay.
So thank you.
That's great, thank you.
Thanks.
Any other public comments? Oh, come on.
Bob.
Not tonight.
Okay. All right, miscellaneous correspondence, anything? You had something, and I'm gonna forget it this one.
Photo for.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. You've been given photos to review for our cover.
Which Erin is hoping to have confirmed by tomorrow.
By tomorrow.
Yeah, so
Okay.
there's a packet of photos, and if you could just go through them, if you have a strong one, these are all submitted to her. She did a contest, the public information officer did, and
So what if you get 5 different choices?
Well, I'm not to defer to her on that.
I don't want this as beautiful as it
It's a
is.
yeah.
I don't want to be reminded of winter.
I agree.
But I think it's beautiful, and does anybody
It's
know
a
where it
beautiful
is?
picture.
Yeah, it's just something that we had to show roads.
Okay, who was just checking?
It's a great picture.
Yeah, I go to West Concord.
I'm excited
I
by
think we need 2 annual reports. We need 2 annual reports.
I'm excited about the Spring Rail Trail, but that's a lot of pavement.
My favorite.
It's a slum.
I forgot
That's my
Because
favorite.
it's mostly black.
See, and I love this because it's one of my favorite, Fairhaven Bay, and this is one of my favorite places.
Pretty nice.
Yeah. So, is it a vertical or horizontal that we need?
It's
You know what, I'm all for
Is
it.
it, who knows, do we need a vertical or horizontal cover? To pick the cover?
Do you have?
Andrew.
Does it matter if it's
Another-
vertical or horizontal, Andrew?
Who's
In terms of
Vertical
the
or
cover, does it matter
horizontal,
if it's
it would seem like verticals to fit a,
for landscape?
Eight
it
by
would be
10.
better if it was a vertical one.
It's vertical, it's vertical, if it's horizontal.
Correct.
All in favor?
Portrait or landscape?
Sorry, what? Linda?
Should have-
Oh, not, okay.
Yes.
Other miscellaneous comments, please?
Yeah.
Please,
Linda
introduce
Esposito,
yourself.
Chair of the Concord Housing Authority. I happen to know that a picture was submitted this afternoon,
Oh, that we haven't
well
seen.
in advance of the deadline,
It wasn't. It's,
but it's not in the packet.
it wasn't
You
to.
know what it is?
Yeah, it's a vertical shot of the inside of Peter Buckley Terrace, which was, the last units were completed in
Oh, okay.
2017, and it's a pretty,
Is it beautiful?
it's a beautiful picture.
You can also go
I think
there.
go in there too. So you're getting 3 choices here.
Okay, I'll give it to the
And it's
PIO.
10:30, we're starting to break records here a lot.
I'm the
There's some
middleman.
great photos. Hopefully they'll all be used in the area report.
Yes. Okay.
So myself.
Uh,
No, it's designed by the masses. It
He
should
said,
not
he said
have-
vertical.
Saying, everybody,
Vertical.
by eliminating this.
Get all that black out.
You know, blackouts.
But well, you're gonna have, you know, something down here or in writing anyway, right? You just put it, have it in white or green or whatever.
I'm in favor of whatever. This is, what do we,
Okay.
can't leave Andrew out.
I
Hang
like
out
the bridge
by
to
here.
cross
Sure we
the
can.
metaphor.
The PIO.
So you're the chair, you decide.
Okay, then we will discuss this.
It's so easy.
I mean, I heard
Heard
everybody.
everybody's been your own chair.
Yeah, you got it. I'll let Aaron know.
Okay, everybody cedes their vote to me.
We just, we all gave you our.
All right, there we go. Okay,
You can take your favorite.
absolutely. Everybody can blame me. I'm on CCTV for that. We skipped over liaison reports. Does anybody
Good
have?
idea.
Good idea.
Okay,
We skipped
I've got
on
lots
the
to
other
tell you,
thing, the
but
last
we'll do
meeting
it
as
another
well.
time.
Yeah.
I know.
We can
Even
have a
I
whole-
the busy ones.
We can have a whole
Hey, wait a
meeting on
second.
liaison
Okay,
report.
that's right.
I was busy.
While you're chair.
I sent my video around.
Minutes, dude.
Okay, come on. Committee nominations, let's hear
I
it.
nominate Paul Ware for Black Birch Lane to the Historic Districts Commission as an associate member for a non-expired term to expire January 1st, 2020. I also nominate Ray Andrews of 11 Dalton Road to the Affordable Housing Funding Committee for a term to expire May 1st,
April 30th.
April 30th,
2019.
2019. I move it, yeah, I make a motion to appoint somebody, right? Yeah, I move to appoint Suzanne Jarnard of 61 Hubbard Street to the Dog Park Feasibility Study Committee to fill a non-expired term to expire May 31st. I'm sorry, December 31st, 2018.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and now we are going to adjourn to executive session for the purpose of discussing land acquisition.
So moved.
Not to return to public meeting.
So moved.
Second?
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Quick question for you, Johnny.
Yes.
On the